Welcome to my channel. In my channel, you can watch various type of fiction and fantasy audiobook. If you want more video like this, please subscribe my channel.
Greek goddesses at war. Every goddess wants me on their side. Part 1. The twilight at Zhongcheng University always carries a lazy, warm feeling. As soon as the bell in the teaching building rang out, a commotion of chairs being moved around erupted in the history department classrooms. Gu Function closed his notebook, stretched, narrowed his eyes slightly behind his silver-rimmed glasses, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Finally, class is over. The professor talked about the Peloponnese War like it was a romance drama again today. The love-hate relationship between Athens and Sparta made me want to write a fan fiction. Gu Function, male, 22 years old. A second-year graduate student in the history department of Zhongcheng University, majoring in Western classical literature. He has a handsome and refined appearance, but his temperament carries an inexplicable air of wickedness. His classmates all said behind his back that he had a face that looked like a femme fatale, but he liked to spend every day in the library devouring ancient books, and could analyze Homeric epics all day long. The female students secretly called him a celibate god, but he didn't care. He knew that deep down he wasn't that serious. Gu Function slung his shoulder bag over his shoulder, his phone already open on a food delivery app, a bunch of tempting pictures of delicious food popping up on the screen. Should I add 2 eggs to my grilled cold noodles? Grilled duck intestines with lettuce. I'll start with some takoyaki to satisfy my craving. As I stepped out of the school gate, the setting sun cast a golden glow. Gu Function walked with his head down, his steps light and quick, the setting sun casting a long shadow over him. A breeze blew, and the black hair on her forehead fluttered slightly, causing female students passing by to turn around and take a second look. He was completely oblivious to this, his mind preoccupied with only one thought. Eat your fill before you go back to write your thesis. The aroma of food wafted from the snack street near the school gate, and Gu Function quickened his pace, his smile deepening. Life is about enjoying it while you can. Having studied ancient Greek mythology for so many years, those gods must have lived such carefree lives, constantly falling in love and fighting. If only I could travel through time. Tilda. The best thing to do is to go directly and flirt with Aphrodite, and see if the goddess of love is really that alluring. As he was thinking, he heard a piercing engine roar from afar. Gu Function looked up. A dump truck loaded with yellow soil came rushing towards us like an out-of-control beast, its tires screeching as it rubbed against the ground, but it couldn't stop at all. Depend on. He only managed to utter one word before his body was sent flying by the enormous impact. The world shattered as it spun around, and excruciating pain surged like a tide, only to be quickly swallowed by darkness. In his last wisp of consciousness, Gu Function saw the driver's terrified face, the lingering orange-red sunset on the horizon, and heard his own resentful mutterings. I haven't even had my grilled cold noodles yet. How did I manage to hit the jackpot like this? Never been in a relationship before getting married. Even if it's time travel, can't we at least have some class? A dump truck is so tacky. Could it be that I, Gu Function, am going to die here today, that my life is over like this? Then, all fell silent. I don't know how much time has passed. Gu Function felt as if he were immersed in warm seawater, his body light and weightless, without any pain. The faint sounds of sheep bleating, the whisper of the sea breeze, and the rustling of grass in the wind could be heard. The bleating of sheep. He struggled to open his eyes. The first thing that catches the eye is a sky so blue it seems unreal, with a few white clouds drifting lazily by, and the sunlight shining gently down, carrying a faint scent of olive trees and sea salt. He lay on a soft patch of grass, covered with a coarse cloth robe, with a simple shepherd's staff beside him. In the distance, flocks of sheep graze leisurely among the hills, smoke curls from the chimneys of several white stone cottages at the foot of the mountains, and the sea gleams golden in the setting sun. Is this a dream? Gu Function sat up abruptly and looked down at his hands. Slender and long, with distinct knuckles, her skin was so white it was almost transparent, like the finest jade. He looked down at his legs, waist, and chest. Everything was exquisitely beautiful, with smooth lines and perfect proportions, exuding the unique naivete and vitality of youth. My heart started racing. He staggered to the nearby stream and, by the clear water, saw his new appearance. The boy, around 16 or 17 years old, had slightly curly black hair and exquisitely beautiful features. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, her eyes like stars, her nose was straight, her lips were rosy, and when she smiled, there was a shallow dimple on her left cheek. Her whole face was beautiful in a way that was almost aggressive, yet because of her slightly upturned peach blossom eyes, she exuded a natural charm and wickedness. Quote. Who is this? Gu Function reached out and touched the reflection in the water. The boy blinked and smiled at him with a hint of cunning. Nice. It's so beautiful it's almost excessive. It was so beautiful that he was momentarily stunned. Memories flooded his mind in an instant. The original owner's name was Philos, 16 years old, the youngest son of an ordinary shepherd in a nearby small village. He has both parents, 2 older sisters and a younger brother. His family is poor but harmonious. Today, as usual, I went up the mountain to herd sheep alone. I accidentally missed a step, rolled down the slope, and passed out. Then, the soul was replaced, and the new ruler successfully took over. Gu Function took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. I time traveled, and it's actually a journey to the ancient Greek mythological world. He looked around. Mediterranean climate, endless olive groves, the faint outline of temples in the distance, villages with white stone buildings, and the salty sea breeze. The professional competence of the history graduate students was instantly on full display. The timeline is probably the late Bronze Age, or the Mycenaean civilization. No, the architectural style is closer to the classical period, perhaps an era when gods roamed the earth. He looked down at his own face, then at the simple coarse cloth robe he wore and the flock of bleating sheep at his feet. At the beginning, I am a handsome shepherd boy with the following equipment, a wooden staff and a flock of sheep, but no system and no cheat codes. Ha ha ha, this is awesome. I can't believe I've time traveled too. Ha ha ha. Gu Function suddenly laughed, his shoulders shaking with laughter. Alright, dump truck wasn't lying to me. Given such a top-tier face, I forgive its less than elegant entrance. He stood up, brushed the grass off his backside, picked up his shepherd's staff, and, mimicking what he remembered, whistled at the flock. The sheep obediently gathered around and followed him down the mountain. As the sun sets, the sea turns a golden red hue. Gu Function walked behind the flock of sheep, looking at the picturesque scenery before him, a strange feeling stirred within him. He originally thought that time travel would make him panic, afraid, and at a loss. Strangely enough, he didn't seem to mind at all. I even felt a faint sense of anticipation. Philos' inner thoughts. Ancient Greek mythology. Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and Aphrodite. Thinking of the legendary goddess of love and beauty, Gu Function's peach blossom eyes narrowed slightly, and a meaningful smile appeared on his lips. That goddess is probably every man's dream, isn't she? If only I could see her in person. He lowered his head and chuckled softly, his voice carrying on the evening breeze, clear and melodious. From this day forward, I am Philos. With a mortal body, how can one climb the ranks in this land of gods, relying solely on this face and this brain? Goddesses, harem, sounds pretty good. I will conquer all the goddesses of ancient Greek mythology one day. The boy, with his back to the setting sun, had his silhouette gilded with gold, making him look as beautiful as a statue that had stepped out of a temple. On a distant hillside, a graceful figure quietly appeared. She was an absolutely stunning woman with long, flowing golden hair that cascaded down like a waterfall. She had a graceful figure, snow-white skin, and seemed to radiate a soft glow. She wore a light gauze dress with an exquisite gold belt around her waist, and her bare feet touched the grass without getting a speck of dust on them. At this moment, the beauty gazed at the boy returning home from herding sheep, her red lips slightly curved, and a hint of interest flashed in her eyes. The boy walked in the sunset, surrounded by a flock of sheep. His black hair was blown by the wind, and the lines of his profile were breathtakingly beautiful. He would occasionally bend down and speak to the sheep, his voice clear and cheerful, tinged with a smile. What an interesting little fellow. The woman chuckled softly, flicked her finger, and a pink rose phantom bloomed in the air before quietly disappearing. You're the one. She turned and left, her gauze skirt fluttering in the wind, leaving behind a faint scent of roses. The wind was gentle in the twilight of ancient Greece. And a love story destined to be poignant and earth-shattering has quietly begun. 3 days have passed. Gu Function, or rather, Philos, had fully adapted to the life of a shepherd. In the early morning, they drive the sheep up the hillside. At noon, they take a nap under the olive trees, and in the evening, they return to greet the sunset. Simple, calm, even a little boring. If I were to live like this for the rest of my life. He lay on the grass, a blade of grass dangling from his mouth, squinting at the clouds in the sky. Isn't this face a bit of a waste? Over the past 3 days, he carefully recalled all the memories of this body and verified his situation. This is a small island in the northwestern Aegean Sea called Callisto. The village has about 300 households, who make a living by raising livestock and growing olives. The original owner's father was named Milan, his mother was named Callia, his sisters were already married, and his younger brother Demet was only 8 years old. The family was harmonious, but indeed poor. Their most valuable possession was their flock of 40-odd sheep. But at least I don't have to be pressured by my professor to write papers anymore. He chuckled self-deprecatingly and rolled over. Just then, a soft singing voice drifted from afar. The sound was ethereal and melodious, like a duet of sea breeze and harp, yet it carried an indescribable allure. The flock of sheep suddenly stirred, even the usually docile ewes raised their heads and looked in the direction of the song. Philos sat up and pricked up his ears. The singing came from the other side of the hillside, accompanied by the faint sound of water, as if someone was bathing by the stream. Who would sing here at this time? He frowned, a sense of foreboding creeping into his heart. In ancient Greek mythology, 9 out of 10 encounters with beautiful women in the wild were actually traps. The remaining one is definitely a death trap. But curiosity ultimately prevailed. He stood up, brushed the grass off his clothes, gripped his shepherd's staff, and quietly walked up the hillside. After climbing over a small hill, the sight before him made him gasp for breath. Beside a crystal-clear stream, a woman was bending over, scooping water with her back to him. Her long, golden hair cascaded down to her waist like a waterfall, shimmering with a honey-like luster in the warm sunlight. The thin white gauze dress was wet and clung to her body, outlining her breathtaking curves. Her exposed skin was so white it was almost transparent, her ankles were slender, and her bare feet on the pebbles seemed to be walking on clouds with elegance. Even just her back view is breathtakingly beautiful. Philos instinctively held his breath. Who's there? The woman suddenly turned around, her voice soft, with just the right amount of panic. Philos also got a clear look at her face. It was a face beyond description. The features were as perfect as a sculpture, and the eyes were a deep blue, deeper than the deepest part of the Aegean Sea. Her nose was straight, her lips were full and rosy, and the corners of her lips were slightly upturned, naturally giving her a smile. What's most deadly are those eyes. When they look over, it's as if the whole world is captivated by them. She is Aphrodite. Philos was almost certain. Even if it wasn't the real person, it was definitely some goddess associated with beauty. He forced himself to calm down and cleared his throat. I am a shepherd from a nearby village, and my name is Philos. I heard singing just now and thought someone needed help. He lowered his eyelids, adopting a respectful yet slightly shy demeanor, while his mind raced with calculations. Philos' thoughts. The goddess appeared here and deliberately sang to attract attention. Her intentions were obvious. Oh, I see. The woman smiled slightly, a smile that seemed to brighten the surrounding sunlight. My name is Iris. I was just a traveler passing through. It was so hot, I wanted to wash my face, but I didn't mean to bother you. Philos sneered inwardly, but remained outwardly docile. No, I won't bother you. However, wolves often roam this valley, so Miss Iris should be careful since she's traveling alone. Are you showing concern for me? Iris tilted her head and asked playfully, her expression a half smile, a hint of amusement flashing in her eyes. No kind shepherd would put a beautiful traveler in danger. Philos's answer was impeccable. Iris chuckled softly, stepped barefoot onto the grass, and walked towards him. As she approached, a faint scent of roses wafted out, the fragrance seemingly alive, entering the nostrils and stirring the heartstrings. Philos felt his heartbeat quicken involuntarily, not out of attraction, but as some kind of instinctive physical reaction. Philos. She stopped in front of him, tilting her head slightly upwards to look at him, a posture that made her appear petite and delicate. I think I twisted my ankle. Could you help me up? Philos' thoughts. My goodness. Classic, fake accident, tactic. I never thought even the goddess of ancient Greece would use this trick. Philos looked down and saw that her left ankle was indeed slightly red, but with the body of a goddess, the injury would probably heal itself in the next second. Of course, Miss Iris. He reached out and carefully supported her arm. The moment their skin touched, a tingling, electric-like sensation coursed through their entire bodies. Philos suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and steadied his breathing. "Miss, would you like me to take you to a nearby village? My father is an elder in the village and can provide you with lodging." "Thank you so much." Iris leaned against him, feeling as light as a feather. "But I'd rather see how you herd sheep. I grew up in the city and have never seen the life of a shepherd." Her voice was soft and pleading, something no normal man could refuse. Philos, however, understood the implied meaning. She wanted to spend more time with him. "If you don't mind the tedium, I can take you to see the sheep." He smiled and helped her walk down the hillside. The sheep saw them and gathered around. Iris seemed very interested and reached out to touch the head of the lead ram. The usually grumpy ram lowered its head meekly and rubbed against her palm. "They like you very much." Philos observed her movements. "Animals are always simpler than humans," Iris said meaningfully. "They can sense the purest things." Philos' thoughts. Unexpected. Cupid is not as rumored, always flaunting his charms. Beneath his divine power lies a delicate heart. The two walked to the olive tree, where Philos spread out a clean sheepskin and helped her sit down. "Your foot needs some treatment." He took out some herbs from his small leather bag, prepared by the original owner's mother for emergency use in the wild. "I'll apply it to you, it will help you heal faster." Iris blinked. "You know medicine. A shepherd should always know something." He crouched down and carefully lifted her ankle. "It has a delicate and smooth feel, like the finest silk." The red mark on his ankle stood out against his fair skin, but Philos keenly noticed that the edges of the mark were too neat, unlike a natural sprain. He quietly crushed the herbs, applied them to the wound, and gently bandaged it with a clean strip of cloth. Throughout the entire process, Iris kept her eyes on him. "You are very gentle," she said softly. "It's just doing my duty." Philos stood up, took a step back, and maintained a polite distance. Iris watched his actions to avoid suspicion, a hint of a smile flashing in her eyes. "Philos, how old are you?" 16, he replied. "And you, Miss Iris?" Age is a secret for girls." She winked playfully. "But I'm definitely much older than you." "Yes, I can tell." Iris raised an eyebrow. "Oh, how can you tell?" "Temperament," Philos frankly stated. "Miss Iris possesses a kind of composure and elegance that comes with age, something that young girls cannot have." That was a clever way of putting it. It both flattered her and implied that she had figured something out. Cupid smiled, and this time it was a genuine smile. "You're so good with words. Are the other boys in the village like you?" "Miss Iris, I was just telling the truth." Philos sat down opposite and began whittling a wooden stick. This was the original owner's habit. She would always do some handicrafts in her spare time. Sunlight filtered through the gaps in the olive leaves, casting dappled shadows between the two. The sheep grazed leisurely around them, and the sound of waves crashing on the shore could be heard in the distance. The atmosphere was so peaceful it was almost beautiful. "Philos," Iris suddenly spoke up, "do you have someone you like?" Philos' inner thoughts. Holy crap, is Cupid really this direct? We've only known each other for half a day, and he already wants to take me all at once. Philos paused, his carving knife still in his hand, and looked up at her. "Why do you ask that?" "Just out of curiosity." She rested her chin on her hand, her gaze lingering on his face. "A handsome young man like you must have a lot of girls who like you, right?" "Ha ha ha tilde, I'm just a shepherd." He continued to whittle wood with his head down. "My family is poor, and I don't know how to do anything but herd sheep. The village girls, they prefer to marry young men who can afford olive groves. They just have no taste." Iris's footsteps suddenly drew closer. Gu Function looked up and found that she had moved closer to him without him noticing, and the distance between them was less than a foot. Her eyes were fixed on him, and starlight seemed to shimmer deep within her azure pupils. "True beauty has nothing to do with wealth or status," Iris said softly. "It's like the wildflowers in this valley, ordinary yet with a unique fragrance." Her breath, carrying the scent of roses, brushed against his cheek. Philos felt his heart pounding, a primal urge awakening within him, not his emotion, but the body's instinctive reaction, an ultimate yearning for beauty. But he held it down firmly. "Miss Iris," he shifted back, "you are a distinguished traveler, and I am but a shepherd. This distance is probably not appropriate." "Oh, why?" Instead of backing away, She moved even closer, asking, "Don't you think I'm pretty enough?" "No, no, no, quite the opposite." Philos smiled wryly. "It is precisely because you are so beautiful that I must be even more cautious. Beauty is a gift from the gods, but mortals who arbitrarily touch it often pay a price." Iris's eyes lit up. "You have a really funny way of talking." "He doesn't seem like a boy his age." "Because I've read some books," he said vaguely. "Oh, what book?" "Homer's poetry, Hesiod's Theogony, and the works of some philosophers. These are all things that actually existed in the original owner's memories, although this shepherd boy had only heard the bards sing about them. Gu Function decided to embellish them appropriately." Iris seemed lost in thought. "Do you like mythology?" "I prefer to study the logic behind the actions of deities." Philos put down the wooden stick in his hand and looked at the distant sea. "For example, why does Zeus always cheat on his wife? Why is Hera so obsessed with revenge? And why does Aphrodite interfere in mortal love? Then why do you think Cupid intervened?" she asked, a hint of barely perceptible tension in her voice. "Maybe it's because of boredom." Philos shrugged. "Immortality is a very long process. Watching ordinary people go crazy, suffer, and rejoice for love is like watching ants carrying food. It's a form of entertainment." Iris's expression froze for a moment. "So you don't believe in love?" she asked softly. "I believe love exists," Philos said, "but I don't believe that gods interfere in love out of good intentions. Just as hunters don't set traps because they love their prey, they do so for fun, or some other purpose." He said this while looking directly at Cupid. The air between the two seemed to freeze. After a long while, Iris suddenly laughed, her laughter as clear and melodious as a silver bell. "Dear Philos, you are such a special child. I was just stating my opinion." He picked up the stick again. "I hope my crude language did not offend you." "No, no." She stood up, lightly, her ankle injury seemingly completely healed. "On the contrary, I find you very amusing. I haven't met a truly clear-headed mortal like you in a long time." She also looked towards the sea, her profile breathtakingly beautiful in the sunlight. "I'm leaving," she suddenly said. "Your feet. It's all better now." She turned back and smiled at him. "Thank you for taking care of me, Philos. We will meet again." Before he could answer, she had already turned and walked towards the woods. Her white gauze dress fluttered in the wind, and her long golden hair danced like a flag. A few steps later, her figure disappeared into the forest. Only the lingering scent of roses in the air proves that she once existed. Gu Function sat there for a long time without moving. He had whittled the wooden stick in his hand into a simple flute, and he raised it to his lips and tried to play a few notes. The out-of-tune flute music echoed through the valley, startling a few birds into flight. "Aphrodite," he murmured the name, a smile playing on his lips. "You really are an impatient person." Philos' inner thoughts. Why did you have to say, "a sober mortal," just now? That statement already revealed that you are not the mortal Miss Iris, but the goddess of Mount Olympus. Maybe she did it on purpose. But that's all right. The game has begun. He stood up, brushed the grass off his clothes, and whistled to call the sheep. The sun is setting, it's time to go home. On the way, he kept thinking. When a goddess takes the initiative to approach you, her purpose is definitely not just to have a romantic relationship. Although Aphrodite in mythology was a womanizer, he never did anything meaningless. She must have had ulterior motives in choosing me, an ordinary shepherd boy. Who cares? He shrugged at the end. What's coming will come eventually. We'll deal with whatever comes our way. Anyway, it was pretty exciting. When he reached the village entrance, he saw his younger brother running towards him. "Philo, you're finally back," 8-year-old Demet exclaimed breathlessly. "A really pretty lady came to the village just now. She said she was your friend and brought you a basket of fresh figs." Philos raised an eyebrow and said, "Did she say what her name was?" "Oh, she said her name is Iris." The younger brother's eyes lit up. "Philos, when did you meet such a beautiful older sister?" "She also said she'd come see you again soon." Gu Function smiled as he looked at the basket of fresh, juicy figs in his younger brother's arms. "Yes, very soon," he said. "She'll be back soon. After all, if the hunter has already set a trap, why wouldn't he come back to check on his prey?" And he, the prey, also wanted to see who would ultimately conquer whom in this game. Philos neither showed any fear nor excessive enthusiasm, maintaining an appropriate distance and an air of mystery. Most importantly, he successfully piqued Cupid's interest. But the real test is yet to come. Philos rolled over on the bed, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. My goddess, since you've come to me of your own accord, don't blame me. I'll play this game with you properly, Tilda. As night falls, Callisto Island falls asleep. Meanwhile, in Mount Olympus, the temple of love and beauty, Aphrodite reclines on a golden couch, toying with a rose in her hand, a meaningful smile playing on her lips. Sober mortals, she murmured to herself, are truly fascinating. She recalled the boy's captivating eyes, his seemingly gentle yet aloof attitude, and the look in his eyes when he said, "When gods interfere in love, it's like a hunter setting a trap." It wasn't fear, nor worship, but rather a kind of almost equal scrutiny. Philos, she murmured the name, roses blooming and withering on her fingertips, let's see how long you can stay sober. Outside the window, the sky is full of stars. A chase between gods and mortals has officially begun. The first rule of the game is, whoever falls in love first loses. The next morning, Philos did not go up the mountain to herd the sheep as usual. He stood in front of his family's simple hut, watching his father, Milan, carefully count the goods to be taken to the market. 3 tanned sheepskins, a small jar of olive oil, and 2 pieces of linen cloth woven by my mother. Father, Philos suddenly spoke up, let me go to the market with you today. Milan looked up. The shepherd, in his 40s, had a face etched with the marks of time, but his eyes were gentle. Philos, you don't want to herd sheep anymore. Demet can look after the sheep for a day. Philos pointed to his 8-year-old brother, who was chasing chickens in the yard, and said, I want to go to the market, maybe I can help. The real reason was, he needed intelligence. I've been in this world for 3 days now, and all I know is that I'm on a small island called Callisto, but I know almost nothing about the timeline, the frequency of the gods, activities, or major events. The original owner's memories were limited to this small village, while the market was currently the only place where he could access information. Milan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, you should learn how to do business too. Callia, Philos's mother, came out of the house and handed him a coarse wheat cake. My dear Philos, take this to eat on the way. Remember, don't wander off, and stay close to your father. Don't worry, my dearest mother. Philos gave her a reassuring smile, which looked incredibly radiant in the morning light. The main market on Callisto Island is located on the bay on the east side of the island. When Philos arrived with his father, the sun was just high in the sky, and the market was already bustling with activity. The stalls lined both sides of the cobblestone street, and the air was filled with the smells of spices, grilled fish, leather, and sweat. The vendors' cries rose and fell in waves. Fine Crete pottery, only 3 copper coins. Fresh octopus, just caught this morning. Purple dye from Syria, to give the robes a noble hue. Philos helped his father set up the goods in an empty spot, but his eyes quickly scanned the entire market. He quickly noticed several unusual things. First, in the center of the market stood a giant stone statue about 3 people tall. That was Hermes, the god of commerce and travelers. Then, his gaze swept downwards, where fresh fruit and small offerings were piled up at the foot of the stone statue, and incense burned continuously. Secondly, about 1/3 of the people wear some kind of amulet on their wrist or neck, in various styles, but all made of cheap metal or stone. Finally, he heard a few keywords circulating among the crowd. Divine oracle, sacrifice, divine favor. Father, Philos said in a low voice, has anything unusual happened here lately? I see many people talking about gods. As Milan arranged the sheepskin, he replied, oh, you mean that? The Hermes festival is in 3 days, and there will be sacrifices and celebrations on the island. It is said that this year the temple will also select, God-blessed, individuals, who will receive the honor of serving God for a year. God-blessed, Philos's heart skipped a beat. They are mortals who are specially favored by the gods, and can enter the temple to study and serve, and sometimes they can even receive some small favors, Milan said. But that's all for the children of noble families, it has nothing to do with us. Philos's inner thoughts. No, I'm a time traveler, this could very well be related. The sudden appearance of Aphrodite, and the important festival just 3 days later, isn't this all too coincidental? At this moment, a middle-aged man wearing a worn-out robe walked up to their stall, squatted down, and examined the sheepskin. This sheepskin is of good quality. The man touched the inside of the sheepskin. How much? This is a 5 copper coin, Milan said. Too expensive. 4 pieces. At least 4.5, sir. Look at this tanning process. Philos didn't participate in the bargaining, his attention was drawn to a wooden plaque at the man's waist. The wooden sign is engraved with a simple harp design, the symbol of Apollo. Sir, are you a follower of Apollo? Philos suddenly spoke. Both the man and Milan were taken aback. How did you know? The man asked curiously. The wooden plaque on your waist, and, Philos pointed to the man's fingers, you have calluses on your index and middle fingers, from playing lyre for a long time. And Apollo is the god of music. The man's eyes lit up. Young people have good eyesight. Let me introduce myself. My name is Leon, and I am the clerk of the Temple of Apollo on the island. Milan quickly bowed. Your Excellency Leon, please forgive my son's intrusion. No. He's very interesting. Leon waved his hand and turned to Philos. You know music. I know a little, Philos said modestly. I've heard bards sing Homer's epics and I've also learned some basics of lyre. That's absolutely right. Shepherds would carry a lyre with them while herding sheep. Playing music could help them pass the time, or they could use the music to interact with their companions and the flock. This is a common scene in ancient Greek pastoral poetry and art. In his previous life, Gu Function was a graduate student in history, majoring in Western classical literature. He had indeed studied ancient Greek music theory and could even recite a few passages from Iliad. Leon became even more interested. Oh, what do you know about the god Apollo? Philos' thoughts. The test has finally arrived. This might be an opportunity. Philos organized his thoughts and explained in plain but precise language. Apollo is the god of light, prophecy, music and medicine, the son of Zeus and Leto, and the twin brother of Artemis. His sacred objects are lyre, bow and arrow, and laurel wreath. In Delphi, he conveyed divine pronouncements through the priestesses of Pythia, guiding the cities of Greece. He paused for a moment and added, however, I believe that the core essence of the god Apollo is not these functions, but order. He establishes harmony with music, reveals inevitability with prophecy, and restores balance with medicine. He is the opposite of chaos. Leon's expression changed from curious scrutiny to shock and astonishment. How could a 16-year-old shepherd boy not only know Apollo's divine authority but also articulate such an abstract philosophical concept as order? Child, where did you learn all this from? Leon's voice trembled slightly. Learned from observation. Philos lied without batting an eye. When I'm herding sheep, I often think. Why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west every day? Why do seasons change in a regular pattern? Why can music calm arguments? I believe there must be a deity in charge of these laws. Later, after hearing the bard's poem, I realized that it was the god Apollo. This is simply the perfect answer. It demonstrates wisdom, while maintaining the simple and honest character of the shepherd boy. Leon took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and pondered. When she opened her eyes again, she looked at the handsome shepherd boy in front of her. He seemed to have made up his mind, and then took out a small wooden board and a charcoal pencil from his pocket, and quickly wrote something down. 3 days later, at the Hermes festival celebration, the Temple of Apollo will open the god-blessed selection process. Then he handed the wooden board to Philos, saying, if you're interested, you can use this to participate in the preliminary rounds. The time will be in the afternoon of the next 3 days, and the location will be in the temple area on the west side of the market. Milan was completely bewildered. Sir, my son is just a shepherd. In fact, divine favor is not based on birth, Leon said solemnly. Wisdom and piety are the most important things. Young man, what's your name? Philos. Philos, Leon repeated, I'll remember you. I hope to see you in 3 days. After saying this, he paid 4.5 copper coins for the sheepskin, turned and left, his steps as light as if he had discovered a treasure. Milan looked at the wooden sign in his son's hand, then at Philos's face, opened his mouth, and finally uttered only one sentence. What's going on? Philos looked at the Apollo logo on the wooden sign and a slight smile appeared on his lips. Father, I think I've found something more interesting than herding sheep. For the next half day, Philos helped his father sell goods while gathering intelligence. Through casual conversations with different vendors and customers, he gradually pieced together the basic features of this world. The timeline is roughly equivalent to several decades before the Trojan War. Actually, this was a misjudgment. The timeline of this world became chaotic due to the protagonist's time travel. which will be explained later because someone mentioned that King Laomedon is building a magnificent city wall in Troy, and Laomedon is the father of Priam, the last king of Troy. The gods do indeed frequently intervene in mortal affairs, but usually in the form of human incarnations or by appearing in dreams. Direct manifestations of divine power are rare, and usually only occur during major sacrificial ceremonies. The island's main deities are Hermes, god of commerce and travelers, and Poseidon, god of the sea, but there are also smaller temples dedicated to gods such as Apollo and Athena. The God-blessed selection appears to be a routine event. The selected young people will serve in the temple for a year, learning literacy, arithmetic, rituals, and even certain mystical knowledge. Afterwards, most people would become temple staff, noble stewards, or teachers, thus achieving upward social mobility. Philo's inner thoughts. This is my opportunity. Only by entering the temple system can I come into contact with more mythical figures and understand the true rules of this world. Moreover, if Aphrodite reappears, I will have more leverage to maneuver. In the afternoon, most of the goods were sold out. Mylan couldn't hide the smile on his face as he packed up his stall. Today's income was 30% higher than usual. Philos, thanks to your help. Mylan patted his son on the shoulder. By the way, son, those legends about Apollo, did you really make them up yourself? Yes, father, Philos said. I've thought about these things often, but I haven't said them out loud before. Mylan was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, if you are chosen, then go. The life of a shepherd is not good enough for your mind. Philos felt a warmth in his heart. This simple shepherd father may not understand philosophical thinking, but he knows how to give his son opportunities. Thank you, father. However, Mylan lowered his voice, you must be careful about the temple matters. I've heard that divine gifts are never free. Some God-blessed people end up not quite right. Philos nodded in acknowledgement. Don't worry, I will be careful. When we returned to the village in the evening, my younger brother Demet ran over excitedly. Philo, that pretty lady is here again today. Philos's heart skipped a beat. Miss Iris, yes, it's her. She also brought a jar of honey, saying it was to thank you for treating her foot injury the other day. Demet's eyes lit up. She also asked you a lot of questions, such as what you like, what you usually do, and whether there's anything you particularly want. So, what did you answer? Philos crouched down. I told you you like reading. Even though we don't have any books at home, I said you often talk to yourself when you're herding sheep, as if you're discussing something with someone you can't see. I said you want to go to the other side of the island to see what's on the other side of the sea. Demet counted them off on his fingers. Philos' inner thoughts. As expected of my good brother, you've completely betrayed me. But, it's all right, this information can guide the goddess's judgment. What else did she tell you? She said she'd be back in 3 days and had a surprise for you then, Demet said mysteriously. She told me to keep it a secret, but I couldn't resist telling you. 3 days later is the Hermes festival. Philos squinted. Aphrodite was indeed keeping a close eye on him, even deliberately creating chance encounters. And the surprise, 3 days later. What could it be? Demet, Philos patted his brother's head, next time that older sister comes, you just say. I've recently become very interested in Apollo and am preparing to participate in the God-blessed selection. Why do you say that? Because it's true, Philos smiled. And I want to see her reaction. If Aphrodite truly had some intention towards him, what would she do upon learning that he might enter the realm of other gods? To stop or to support? Or should we accelerate the operation? That night, Philos lay on his hard bed, resting his head on his arm and gazing at the starry sky outside the window. On the 4th day of his journey, he finally shifted from passively adapting to actively planning. The shepherd boy's identity is just the starting point. There is no system, no cheat code. His real weapon is his 21st century history brain, filled with mythological knowledge. Aphrodite's rose trap has been laid, and he plans to dig a few more holes next to it. My goddess, Philos murmured to himself, let's see who is leading whose steps in this game. Outside the window, the night wind rustled through the olive grove. It was as if a soft laugh was fading away in the wind, or perhaps it was just an illusion. Meanwhile, in the distant Mount Olympus, in the temple of love and beauty, Aphrodite gazes at the pensive profile of a young man reflected in the water mirror, rose petals drifting from her fingertips. Apollo's God-blessed selection, she chuckled. A clever little guy. Is this how you try to get my attention? Or are you really trying to escape? She stood up, her gauze skirt flowing like water. But it doesn't matter, the more complex the game, the more interesting it is. The changing images reflected in the water mirror depict scenes from the Hermes Festival celebrations. Aphrodite's red lips curved into a meaningful smile. A surprise in 3 days. I hope you'll like it, my dear Philos. Under the starry sky, the schemes of gods and mortals quietly intertwine. But the threads of fate have only just begun to weave. On the morning of the Hermes Festival, Callisto Island awakens to the sound of conch shell horns. Philos pushed open the wooden window, and the salty sea breeze rushed in, carrying the aroma of toast, spices, and olive oil. Noisy voices drifted from the direction of the bay in the distance, interspersed with the sounds of lyre and aulos music. Philos, look! Demet ran barefoot into the room, holding up a crown made of laurel leaves. Mother made this for you. She said you should dress up nicely for the celebration. Philos took the crown. It was woven rather roughly, but every leaf was a vibrant green. He could picture his mother getting up before dawn and carefully selecting leaves under the olive tree. Dear Demet, please thank Mother for me. He ruffled his younger brother's hair. After dressing properly, Philos stood in front of the only polished bronze mirror in his home and examined himself. The 16-year-old was dressed in a clean, coarse cloth robe, with a modified belt from his father's old leather belt tied around his waist. Philos's black hair was slightly wavy, gleaming with a deep brown sheen in the morning light. His mother insisted that he wear the laurel wreath, the leaves casting dappled shadows on his forehead, making his peach blossom eyes appear even more profound. Philos' inner thoughts. This face certainly has the makings of a femme fatale, no wonder it caught the eye of a goddess. But today, this face is my most effective weapon. A short while later, Father Milan came in from outside, carrying a small cloth bag. Here are 15 silver coins and 40 copper coins, that's all the family can offer. If the temple's selection process requires some bribes. His voice sounded hesitant. Philos did not accept the money bag. Father, if you have to bribe your way into the temple, it's not worth going. Milan paused for a moment, then finally pulled the bag back into his arms and patted his son's shoulder hard. All right, then go and prove your skills. Remember, no matter the outcome, go home for dinner. My mother and I will prepare honey-roasted lamb leg for you. Please rest assured, it will succeed. When I stepped out of my house, the whole village was in an uproar. Women hurried toward the temple district carrying baskets full of offerings, children chased and played in the alleys, and old people sat on their porches, gazing at the bustling streets with their cloudy eyes, as if recalling the celebrations of their youth. Philos followed the crowd toward the market. The closer he got to the bay, the stronger the festive atmosphere became. Colorful ribbons were hung along both sides of the road, and a small stone statue symbolizing Hermes was tied to each olive branch. The vendors set up their stalls early, not only selling goods, but also offering wine and bread to the god of travelers. Occasionally, a priest in white robes would walk by, and people would stop, bow, and drop a few coins into the priest's bronze plate. Philos noticed that there were many faces he rarely saw at the market today. There were merchants wearing long robes with purple trim, mercenaries with swords at their waists, and even a few foreigners with darker skin and strange headdresses. The Hermes Festival is a celebration of trade and travel, attracting visitors from all over the Aegean Sea. Following Leon's instructions, he walked through the busiest part of the market and headed towards the temple area on the west side. The architecture here is noticeably more refined. Wide steps paved with white marble lead to 3 temples side by side. The largest one in the center is the Temple of Hermes, the slightly smaller one on the left is the Temple of Poseidon, and the one on the right is the Temple of Apollo. Crowds gathered in front of each temple. A sacrificial ceremony was taking place in front of the Temple of Hermes, a white goat was being led onto the altar, priests were singing hymns, and smoke was rising from the bronze incense burner. The sound of a chorus, like the sound of ocean waves, came from the Temple of Poseidon, as if some kind of maritime ritual was being performed. And before Temple of Apollo, Philos stopped in his tracks. About 30 young people, ranging in age from 15 or 16 to their early 20s, gathered in the square in front of the palace. They wore robes of various colors, some as simple as Philos, while others were clearly from wealthy families, with gold thread embroidered on their clothes and silver ornaments around their necks. Several priests in white robes stood at the front of the crowd, and Leon was among them. He was looking down at the papyrus scroll in his hand, occasionally glancing up at the young man in front of him. Philos took a deep breath and walked to the edge of the crowd. He immediately felt the gazes upon him, curious, scrutinizing, and disdainful. A shepherd boy dressed in a coarse cloth robe would certainly stand out among a group of clearly well-educated young people. "Hey, look who's this little shepherd who's wandered into the wrong place." A slightly sarcastic voice rang out. The speaker was a brown-haired young man of about 18 years old, dressed in an exquisite linen robe with a decorative short sword hanging at his waist. He was surrounded by 3 or 4 people his age, clearly a small group led by him. Philos looked over calmly. "This is the God-blessed selection process for the Temple of Apollo, right?" "That's true," the brown-haired youth scoffed, "but the selection is for knowledgeable and well-mannered young people, not shepherds." "Can you read? Do you know how to write your own name?" A few low laughs rang out from the surrounding area. Leon looked up, frowned, and glanced in their direction, but did not intervene immediately. Philos' thoughts. A classic scene from a web novel in my past life, a nobleman's son provoking a commoner. "But that's perfect, I'll use you guys as stepping stones." Philos wasn't angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "I do know very few words. But since this young master is so knowledgeable, may I ask him a question?" The brown-haired youth raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead and ask. Let this little shepherd see what true manners are." Apollo's most famous oracle site, Delphi, has an inscription carved at the temple entrance. Philos asked calmly, "What is that inscription? And what does it mean?" The surrounding air suddenly became quiet. The brown-haired youth's expression changed, and his companions exchanged glances. Clearly, nobody knows the answer, or rather, nobody remembers such details. "It's, know thyself, not thee shotten." A cool, clear female voice came from the direction of the temple. All eyes turned to them at once. A priestess is slowly walking down the temple steps. She wore a white robe that was slightly different from the other priests' robes. The collar and cuffs were embroidered with golden sun patterns, and a laurel leaf belt was tied around her waist. Her long, golden hair was braided into an intricate bun and secured with a silver hairpin, with a few strands hanging down her neck. But what's most striking is her face. The priestess slowly removed her veil. Even beneath the solemn priest's robes, that face was breathtakingly beautiful. His deep blue eyes were like the deepest waters of the Aegean Sea, his nose was high and straight, and his lips were perfectly shaped. As she moved, the hem of her robe fluttered in the wind, as if an invisible halo enveloped her. Philos's heart was pounding wildly. That's Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Even though she changed her hairstyle, toned down her alluring charm, and even deliberately made her eyes appear cold and distant, Philos still recognized her at a glance. The goddess herself stepped in, even dressed up as the priestess of the Temple of Apollo. This way of playing is really exciting. The meaning of that inscription is that people should understand their own limitations and nature, and should not be arrogant. The priestess, or rather, Aphrodite disguised as a priestess, continued, her gaze sweeping over the brown-haired youth. "This is a warning to everyone who goes to Delphi to seek an oracle." The brown-haired youth blushed deeply and bowed his head, saying, "Thank you, High Priest, for your guidance." Aphrodite ignored him and walked straight up to Philos. Soon, the two were less than 3 steps apart. Philos could smell a faint fragrance on her, not the strong rose scent he had smelled before, but a blend of laurel, olive, and a cool, snow-capped mountain aroma. Clearly, she altered her body odor. Cupid truly went to great lengths to play this role. "May I have your name?" she asked in a clear and melodious voice. But a hint of barely suppressed joy was hidden in her eyes, like a little girl who had found her favorite toy, completely devoid of the dignity of a god. "My name is Philos." "Phiros," she repeated, as if hearing the name for the first time. "How did you know about Delphi's inscriptions?" "I heard it by chance in the poems of bards," Philos replied, following his prepared statement. "They sometimes mention that inscription when they sing of the god Apollo." "You remembered it just by hearing it?" Aphrodite tilted his head slightly, a subtle movement that betrayed a hint of his true self. "Then do you understand its meaning?" Philos' inner thoughts. "My goddess, are you testing me, or do you just want to talk to me?" "Never mind, let's proceed with the plan." "I think I understand part of it," Philos said earnestly. "For example, when that young master mocked me for being illiterate, I was thinking, does he truly know himself? Is his knowledge genuine wisdom, or simply the result of memorizing what others taught him? Does he understand his own arrogance? A gasp of surprise rippled through the crowd, and all eyes turned to the impolite young master. The brown-haired youth's face immediately turned red. Aphrodite's lips curled up so slightly, almost imperceptibly. Great insight. Priest Leon mentioned you to me, saying that you have a special view of the god Apollo. She turned to face all the candidates. Now that today's first lesson has begun with, Know Yourself, the selection process will officially begin. I am Aria, High Priestess of the Temple of Apollo, and I will be presiding over today's primary election. She used the pseudonym, Aria, which differs from her previous self-proclaimed name, Iris, by only one letter. Philo's inner thoughts. You really don't hide it at all, my goddess. Is this a deliberate hint to me? Leon stepped forward and unfurled the papyrus scroll. The preliminary selection is divided into 3 parts. The event includes a quiz, a musical performance, and a final puzzle solution. Now, everyone, please follow me into the temple's antechamber. The crowd began to move. Philos walked in the middle and could feel Aphrodite, Priestess Aria's gaze falling on him, seemingly casually. Upon entering the temple's antechamber, the light suddenly became solemn. Tall stone pillars support the dome, and murals depicting Apollo driving a sun chariot are painted on the walls. In the center of the hall stands a marble statue of Apollo, holding a lyre, with a solemn expression. Laurel leaves burned in the incense burner, their bitter fragrance filling the air. More than 30 candidates stood in 3 rows. Aphrodite stood beside the statue, while Leon and 2 other priests sat behind low tables on either side, with wax tablets and iron pens on the tables. Part 1. A quiz, Leon announced. I will ask questions, and those who know the answers should raise their hands. 1 point is awarded for a correct answer, and no points are deducted for incorrect answers. However, if you answer incorrectly in the buzzer, you will lose the opportunity to answer the next question. The problems gradually increase in difficulty. It begins with the basic mythology. Who is Apollo's mother? Who is his twin sister, the goddess? What are his main sacred relics? Most candidates were able to answer these questions. Philos didn't rush to raise his hand. He was observing. Aphrodite seemed to be listening, but her gaze would always drift towards him at some point, with a faint smile on her face. The questions gradually become more in-depth. Why is Apollo both a god of medicine and capable of spreading plagues? What was the role of music in ancient Greek education? In what ways does the political influence of the Delphi oracle manifest itself? Fewer and fewer people are raising their hands. The brown-haired youth answered a few questions correctly, and his expression became arrogant again. But when Leon asked, what philosophical concept does the story of Apollo's musical contest with Marthas allude to? He froze. The hall fell silent instantly. Philos, however, raised his hand. Please speak, Philos. Leon nodded. This story is an allegory for the principle of moderation, mesos, Philos said clearly. Marsyas, the god of the forest, found Athena's discarded aulos and, believing he played it more beautifully than Apollo's lyre, challenged her to a duel. Muses, acting as referee, ruled that Apollo was the winner. Marthas disagreed, so Apollo suggested playing it backwards. Lyre could do it, but aulos could not. This symbolizes that the civilized, rational, and moderate art represented by Apollo has triumphed over the primitive, fanatical, and excessive art represented by Marthas. He paused, then added. At the end of the story, Apollo skinned Marsyas alive. Although cruel, in the logic of mythology, this represents a complete negation of excess. Apollo isn't against music or joy, but against unrestrained madness. In the hall, the candidates all turned their heads in admiration upon hearing this. This shepherd was no ordinary person. Even Leon looked surprised. Such in-depth interpretations are usually only offered by senior scholars. Aphrodite, or rather, Priestess Aria, clapped softly, but deliberately kept her face expressionless, seemingly distant. Applause echoed in the empty foyer. A very good answer, she said, looking deeply into Philos's deep blue eyes. You not only know the story, but you also understand the meaning behind it. You get 2 points for this question. The brown-haired youth's face turned pale instantly. Philos answered 2 more questions correctly. At the end of the first part, his score was far ahead. The second part is the musical performance, Priestess Aria announced. Apollo is the god of music, and his servants should understand the harmony of music. Each person plays a simple melody on a lyre or sings a hymn. It doesn't need to be complicated, but it needs to be accurate and harmonious. At the event, some people played skillfully but lacked emotion, some were so nervous that they played the wrong notes, and some simply sang a few lines of praise. The brown-haired youth played a complex melody with skillful technique, earning him some applause. When it was Philo's turn, he took out a simple lyre from his pocket, the original owner's instrument, a 7-stringed instrument with signs of wear and tear on its body. He sat down on the designated stone bench and lightly touched the strings with his fingers. Philo's inner thoughts. The ancient Greek music theory I learned in my past life should finally come in handy. It can't be too complicated, otherwise it won't fit the shepherd boy's character, but it also can't be too mediocre. He chose the Dorian mode, the most basic and solemn mode of ancient Greece. Fingers pluck the strings, and a simple melody flows out. It was not any known hymn, but an improvised melody that imitated the sounds of nature, the wind, birdsong, the babbling of a stream, and finally a quiet ending. While playing, he closed his eyes, as if he were truly recalling the sounds of nature he heard while herding sheep. After the last note faded away, the hall was quiet for a few seconds. Then Aphrodite clapped again. "What piece of music are you playing?" she asked again, a hint of genuine surprise in her voice. "It has no name." Philos opened his eyes. "It's just an echo in the mountains. Apollo is the god of natural order, so I think the music of nature must also be something he loves." A very unique understanding. Aphrodite stood up and walked over to him. "But your violin is very old. If you'd like, could I give you a new one after this?" This remark caused a murmur among the people. A gift given separately by the temple priestess. "This is a rare honor. Thank you for your kind offer," Philos replied politely, "but this violin has been with me for many years, and I've grown accustomed to its sound." A fleeting smile crossed Aphrodite's eyes, a cunning and alluring smile belonging to the god of love himself, though it lasted only for a moment. Part 3, the solution to the puzzle. Leon interrupted the delicate atmosphere. "This is the final test. Each person will receive a wax tablet with a riddle engraved on it. Solve the puzzle and write down the answer within the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Those who answer correctly will advance to the final selection." The wax boards were distributed. Philos received it and saw several lines of ancient Greek script engraved on it. "I am neither alive nor dead. My silence can make millions speak. I can build even though I have no hands. I have no feet, yet I can travel far. What am I?" This is typical of old Greece riddles. He almost immediately came up with the answer, but when he looked up, he found most of the candidates frowning and deep in thought. Because you only have one chance, answering incorrectly will disqualify you from the final competition. The brown-haired youth sweated profusely as he repeatedly wiped the wax tablet. Philos' thoughts. "I can't answer too quickly. After all, it's really too suspicious in this day and age for a shepherd boy to solve this kind of puzzle so quickly." He deliberately waited for a while, pretending to think, and even drew a few meaningless symbols on the wax board with a stylus. When the incense had burned halfway, he began to write down the answer. As the incense stick burned out, Leon collected all the wax tablets. The 3 priests, including Arya, began reviewing the answers. Most of the wax tablets contained various incorrect guesses. Ghost, echo, dream, wind. Leon's eyes lit up when he saw Philos's wax plate. "There is only one word above. Language, logos." "Absolutely right," Leon announced. "The answer is, language. It is neither living nor dead. It is silent, yet through which people communicate. It has no physical form, yet it can build civilization. It has no shape, yet it can spread to distant places." In the end, only 3 people answered correctly, including Philos. "Congratulations to the 3 of you for passing the preliminary selection." Aphrodite stood up. "Now, everyone else, please leave the temple. Those who passed, please follow me for the final selection." The unsuccessful candidates left dejectedly. As the brown-haired youth left, he glared fiercely at Philos. Only Philos and 2 other young men remained in the lobby, a tall, thin boy with curly hair and a seemingly composed young man with dark hair. Aphrodite gestured for them to follow, and they headed deeper into the temple. They passed through an archway and came to a smaller hall. There are no statues of gods here, only a few stone chairs, and starry sky patterns painted on the walls. Most strangely, a huge bronze sundial was embedded in the floor in the center of the room, but the direction of the shadow cast by the pointer seemed a little off. The final election is simple. Priestess Arya said, turning her back to them and looking at the star chart on the wall. Apollo is the god of prophecy. The essence of prophecy is to see the connections between things and to discern hidden patterns. Therefore, the final question is. She turned around, her gaze sweeping over the three of them. Tell me, what's unusual about this room? You have half an incense stick's time to observe. The tall, thin boy immediately began looking around, touching the walls and tapping the floor. The black-haired youth stared at the sundial in deep thought. However, Philos did not act immediately. He first observed Aphrodite. She stood in front of a star chart, her posture seemingly casual, but her fingers were gently tapping a rhythm at her side. That rhythm, it's like some kind of code. Then he observed the room. Walls, floors, ceilings, sundials. Then he understood. He walked up to Aphrodite and said in a low voice, "Priest, I have the answer. But could I tell you that separately?" Aphrodite raises an eyebrow. Why? Because this answer may not be suitable to be said publicly. She gave him a deep look, then said to the other two. You two, please step out for a moment. The tall, thin boy and the black-haired youth exchanged a glance, and although they were puzzled, they still bowed and left the room. After the door closed, only Philos and Aphrodite remained in the room. All right, now it's just the two of us here. Now you can talk. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and the priestly solemnity suddenly vanished, replaced by a languid, romantic aura. Tell me, is there anything unusual about this room? Philos did not answer directly, but walked to the sundial, squatted down, and ran his fingers across the bronze surface. The markings on this sundial are reversed. The time indicated by the shadow cast by the pointer differed from the actual time by 6 hours. Okay, continue. The star chart on the wall, he pointed to the mural, does not depict the current starry sky, but the starry sky on the winter solstice night 3 months from now. Oh, anything else? Philos turned and looked her straight in the eye. The most unusual thing is this room itself. Interesting, tell me about it. Cupid was clearly intrigued by his words. It's not in the original layout of the temple. When I came in, I noticed that the stone of the archway was new and had a different color from the other parts. This room was recently built, specifically for today's selection. Aphrodite laughed. This time it was a genuine, romantic smile from Cupid, alluring yet dangerous. What a clever little guy. She took a few steps closer, so close they could feel each other's breath. Do you know why? To test observation skills, of course. Philos said calmly, but more importantly, it was to create a private space where Priestess Arya could speak with the candidates alone, or Goddess Aphrodite could speak with the mortals she had her eye on. The moment the words left his mouth, the air froze. Aphrodite's smile slowly faded, replaced by an unfathomable expression. Her eyes gradually changed from deep blue to a molten gold color, and her whole body began to radiate a very faint, rose-colored halo. When did you find out? Her voice changed, gaining an ethereal resonance. From the moment you stepped down the temple steps, Philos said frankly, your disguise was perfect, but some things can't be hidden, like that presence that makes everyone involuntarily look at you. That's not the aura of an ordinary person. So why didn't you say it back then? Because I want to see how this play, personally directed by the goddess, will unfold. Aphrodite stared at him for a long time, then suddenly chuckled softly. Laughter, like silver bells, echoed throughout the room. Interesting, so interesting. She reached out, her fingertips almost touching Philos's cheek, but stopped at the last inch. I have lived countless years and seen countless mortals. They either prostrated themselves on the ground begging for blessings or foolishly tried to rebel against divine power. And you are the first person to calmly play this game with me. Is this my honor, goddess? It all depends on you. Aphrodite's hand finally fell, gently lifting his chin. Her touch was icy cold, yet it sent a burning sensation through Philos. I can give you true divine favor, not Apollo's, but mine. Wealth, beauty, love, everything you desire, I can give you. Then, what's the price? Philos asked, without avoiding her touch. The price is. Aphrodite's red lips curved into a seductive smile. Become my especial darling, Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Show how radiant the chosen one of Cupid is, both among humankind and before the gods. Your appearance should make all the goddesses jealous and all the gods take notice. I want you to become my masterpiece. As soon as he finished speaking, Philos closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was thinking quickly. To accept That would mean becoming a pawn, or even a plaything, of Cupid. Refuse. You might anger the goddess, and the consequences could be unpredictable. But the third way, I accept, my dearest goddess, he replied quickly, but on one condition. Aphrodite squinted. What? You, a mere mortal, dare to negotiate with a god? You just said that I'm different from other people. Philos met her gaze. Then why not make me truly different? I will not passively accept your favor, I will actively earn it. What's the meaning? Please give me a year, Philos said. In this year, I will not only become God-blessed Apollo, but I will also earn real fame in the world. It wasn't through your divine power, but through my own wisdom and ability. If I achieve this a year from now, then you can formally bestow upon me the title of Cupid's favorite. Aphrodite's expression became complicated: surprise, admiration, curiosity, and a hint of excitement at being challenged. What if we can't do that? Then I voluntarily become your most ordinary believer, and will no longer receive special treatment. After they finished speaking, the two fell silent. The star chart on the wall seemed to be slowly rotating. That was actually the effect of Aphrodite's divine power, Philos only now realizing. Finally, the goddess smiled. That smile was no longer just alluring, but carried genuine joy. Okay, I agree. She withdrew her hand. But since you've brought up this game, I'll set the rules. No problem, goddess. First, throughout this year, I will still be by your side as Priestess Arya. This is to observe any recent changes in your condition. Second, you can't tell anyone my real identity. Third, she leaned closer and whispered in his ear, her warm breath brushing against his skin. Every 7 days, you must come to this room alone to see me and report your progress. If I get bored, the game might end at any moment. Philos felt his ears burning upon hearing this, a primal bodily reaction, a physiological flutter of excitement in the face of ultimate beauty. I agree, he said. Aphrodite took a step back, the aura around him gradually receded, and his eyes returned to their deep blue color. She transformed back into the dignified Priestess Arya. Well then, Philos candidate, she raised her voice so the two outside the door could hear, your observations are very keen. The sundial's anomaly, the time difference in the star chart, the newly built room, everything is correct. She walked to the door, opened it, and said to Leon, who was waiting outside. Final election result. Philos passed. He will be God-blessed this year's Temple of Apollo. Leon smiled with satisfaction, while the other two candidates could not hide their disappointment. Aphrodite turned to Philos and said in a voice only he could hear. Remember, you only have 7 days. I'll wait for you here, Tilda. Then she raised her voice. Now, go and join the Hermes festival. At dusk, return to the temple to collect your God-blessed badge. Philos bowed and took his leave. As he stepped out of the temple, the afternoon sun made him squint. An even more lively commotion came from the direction of the market, as the sacrificial ceremony seemed to be entering its climax. He stood on the temple steps, overlooking the entire bay. The masts of the ships were like a forest, and the crowds were like a tide. Philos' inner thoughts. 1 year, from a shepherd boy to someone who has won fame. Tilda the goddess wants to see my abilities, so I will show them to her. But more importantly, in this process, I need to understand her, the weaknesses of the gods, and the rules of this world. He walked down the steps and blended into the festive crowd. In the distance, before the temple of Hermes, white incense smoke rose into the sky, drawing winding trails against the azure backdrop. In that special room deep within the temple of Apollo, Aphrodite stood beside a sundial with reverse markings, his fingers lightly tracing the spot where Philos had just stood. He really is an interesting little fellow, Cupid murmured to himself, a golden glint in his eyes. Let's see how far you can go. Outside the window, festive cheers surged in like waves. The game between gods and mortals has now entered its most exciting phase. The stakes in this game are far greater than anyone can imagine, not only Philos' fate, but perhaps also the long-dormant heart of Eros himself. The process of receiving the God-blessed badge was simpler than Philos had imagined. When he returned to the temple of Apollo at dusk, most of the priests and candidates had already left. Only Leon remained in front of the altar in the foyer, arranging the sacrificial implements. Philos, you're here. Leon saw him and gave him a gentle smile. Priestess Arya has announced the selection results. Congratulations. From today onwards, you are a God-blessed Temple of Apollo. Then, he took out a wooden box with exquisite carvings from the table. The wooden box was opened, revealing a bronze badge, engraved with the Apollo and Lyre designs, surrounded by laurel leaves. Beside it was a scroll of parchment, inscribed in exquisite script with the rights and obligations of God blessed. From now on, you will have a room in the temple, where you will study reading, writing, arithmetic, music and theology every morning, and assist with temple affairs in the afternoon. You will receive a monthly stipend of 15 silver coins, with additional rewards on holidays, Leon explained. Your family will receive the temple's protection, and your household taxes will be reduced by 30%. Philos took the badge. It felt slightly cool to the touch. He noticed a line of small print on the back of the badge. The light of knowledge guides the devout heart. Priest Leon, he asked, what about the other God-blessed ones? Weren't 3 chosen today? You're the only one who passed the final selection. Leon's expression was slightly strange. Priestess Arya said, the other 2's answers weren't complete enough. Philos understood perfectly. This was clearly Aphrodite's arrangement. She wanted to observe him alone, so naturally she wouldn't let anyone else get in her way. Wear it, Leon said solemnly. It's not just an honor, it's a responsibility. As a God-blessed person, you need to live in the temple's dormitory and participate in morning prayers, study, and labor every day. After a year of service, based on your performance, the temple will write you a letter of recommendation to help you secure a position with a noble family or merchant guild on the island. Philos accepted the badge. The bronze felt heavy and cool in my palm. Thank you, Lord Leon. There's no need to call me, sir. Leon waved his hand. In the temple, the priest and the God-blessed are equals. You can call me Priest Leon, or just call me by my first name, I won't mind. Also, Priestess Arya specifically instructed that you stay in the second dormitory room on the east side. That's the room with the best view. Philos' inner thoughts. Special instructions. My goddess, do you really like me that much? You even prepared the best room for me. Leon led Philos through the temple's corridors. The setting sun bathed the white marble columns in gold, casting long shadows on the ground. Occasionally, a priest returning late would hurry by and cast a curious glance at them. As Leon walked, he explained, in the days to come, you will learn to read and write, arithmetic, music, astronomy, and temple rituals. Wednesday and Friday afternoons are free time. You may leave the temple, but you must return before sunset. Next, they arrived at a row of stone houses on the east side of the temple complex. These houses are much more refined than the buildings in the village, with white walls and linen curtains hanging at the entrances. The door to the second room was ajar. Leon pushed open the door. This is your room. The bed, desk, and storage box are all ready. Please take a look. Philos entered the room. The room wasn't big, about 10 square meters, but it was very clean. A wooden bed covered with a wool blanket was placed against the wall, with a small wooden table and stool beside it. There was a locked storage box standing in the corner. There was a wardrobe, a desk, and a stone basin for washing up in front of the window. The most striking feature is the window. As Leon said, it offers an excellent view, facing the bay and showing the gradually darkening sea and the scattered fishing lights. He put down his simple luggage, sat on the edge of the bed, and let out a long sigh. Even more precious was the fact that there were 3 papyrus scrolls on the desk. These are excerpts from Homeric epics, a copy of Hesiod's Theogony, and an introduction to music theory, Leon said. Take good care of them. Many noble children can't afford these. Philos stroked the rough surface of the book, a genuine feeling welling up inside him. In this era where knowledge is monopolized, books themselves are a form of power. Thank you, Priest Leon. No need to thank me, thank Priestess Arya. Leon lowered his voice. She seems to have a special fondness for you. This is a good thing, but it could also be a burden. The relationships within the temple are complex, you must be careful. After saying this, the middle-aged priest patted him on the shoulder and turned to leave. Philos walked around the room, pinned the badge to his robe, and looked at himself in the bronze mirror. The boy in the mirror was still stunningly beautiful, but there was something different in his eyes, the clarity and scheming of a time traveler, belonging to GU function. Philos' inner thoughts. Okay, now the game has been upgraded. The shepherd boy has become God-blessed, with a platform for learning and basic living security. Next, I'll use these resources to begin my plan to become famous. He opened the book of Hesiod and quickly browsed through it. The content is largely consistent with the version he studied in his previous life, but there are some minor differences, such as the genealogical relationships of certain deities and the chronological order of certain mythological events. This is important because it means he cannot rely entirely on his knowledge from his previous life and must re-verify the settings of this world. On the 5th day of the journey, from a shepherd boy to God blessed. The progress was much faster than he had anticipated, but also much more dangerous. The 7-day pact with Aphrodite, the goddess of love, was like a Damocles sword hanging over my head. He had no idea what demands that capricious goddess would make or how she would observe him. But one thing is certain. He cannot wait passively. Philos took out the laurel wreath from his bosom, the one his mother had made for him that morning. The leaves have begun to wither, with curled and yellowed edges. He carefully placed the crown on the table and smoothed a leaf with his fingers. 1 year, he murmured to himself, I must live to see at least a year from now. A burst of noise came from outside the window, the celebration had entered its jubilant phase. Philos closed the book and decided to attend the celebration, not just for fun, but also to observe, socialize, and gather information. Night had fallen when we left the temple. The Hermes festival festivities continue. In the distance, the glow of bonfires illuminates half the sky, and lyre and flute music drift on the night breeze. But the temple area was very quiet, as if an invisible barrier kept worldly pleasures out. Dozens of bonfires were lit along the bay, their light illuminating the revelers. The aroma of roasted meat filled the air, the barrels of liquor were opened, and aulos and hand drums played a lively rhythm. The men raised their glasses in celebration, the women danced wearing flower garlands, and the children frolicked and played among the crowd. Philos walked among the crowd, keenly observing everything. He noticed several details. First, there seems to be a class division on the island, but it's not particularly strict. Nobles and commoners can drink and dance together, although there are obvious differences in their clothing and accessories. The second thing he noticed was that there were at least 3 different styles of clothing, representing visitors who may have come from different city-states. Thirdly, and most importantly, he also witnessed a miracle. Beside the largest bonfire, a drunken merchant suddenly began to sing in a language he had never heard before, his voice so beautiful it seemed otherworldly. Those around him knelt down in worship, saying it was an inspiration bestowed by Hermes. The chanting lasted for about 3 minutes when the merchant suddenly collapsed. When he woke up, he had no memory of what had just happened. Philos' inner thoughts. Can deities directly possess or influence mortals? This information is very important. But it seems random and temporary. I wonder if there are any patterns or costs involved. The Hermes festival festivities continued late into the night. When Philos returned to the village, the campfire had gone out, leaving only a few embers flickering in the night. Every household had terracotta figurines dedicated to Hermes hanging under their porches, casting grotesque shadows in the moonlight. Upon opening their wooden door, Callia, the mother, immediately jumped up from her stool. Philos, how is it? Her eyes gleamed in the oil lamplight. Mylan also came out from the inner room, carrying tools for repairing fishing nets. Demet, rubbing his sleepy eyes, ran over barefoot and hugged Philos's leg. Good news, I passed. Philos calmly said, taking the badge from his pocket, cast in bronze, with Apollo and lyre on the front and his name and the words, God blessed, on the back. Callia covered her mouth, tears welling up instantly. Mylan took the badge, his rough fingers tracing the patterns on it, speechless for a long time. Does this mean, you're moving to the temple tomorrow? Mylan asked in a hoarse voice. Yes, father. The temple will provide lodging and meals, as well as a monthly stipend of 15 silver coins. Philos paused. I'll send the stipend home at the end of the month. No, son, Mylan said firmly. Keep that money for yourself. There's always a place in the temple where money is needed. Having worked as a shepherd for decades, Mylan knows very well that upward mobility never comes for free. Philos did not argue. He knew that some things didn't need to be said. That night, the family sat around the stove until the firewood burned out. Mylan recounted the storms he had witnessed at sea in his youth. Callia hummed an old lullaby, and Demet fell asleep on his brother's shoulder. Philos listened quietly, watching the firelight dance on his family's faces. He knew this was the last time he would sit here as Philos, the pure shepherd. At 4:30 a.m., Philos woke up. He lay on the hard bed for a while, listening to the gradually fading chirping of insects outside and the first crowing of a rooster in the distance. The darkness had not yet faded, but the eastern sky was already turning a pale white, and the thin morning light cut out pale lines on the muddy ground through the cracks in the wooden window. He got up quietly, without lighting the earthenware oil lamp. The luggage I packed yesterday was right next to the bed, a coarse cloth bundle containing 2 changes of clothes, some dry food packed by my mother, and that withered laurel wreath. Today, he put on his most presentable linen robe and wore a polo. The God-blessed badge was pinned to his left shoulder, its bronze gleaming faintly in the dim light. As I pushed open the door, I heard rustling sounds coming from the kitchen. Mother Kalia, wearing a shawl, stood in front of the stove, pouring wheat porridge into an earthenware pot. She turned around and saw her son, her eyes slightly red, but she forced a smile. "Philos, why are you up so early? There's still an hour until dawn." "Dear mother, I want to leave early," Philos said softly. "It's the first day, and I can't be late." Kalia nodded, ladled a full bowl of hot porridge and handed it to him, then slipped a piece of coarse wheat cake coated in honey into his hand. "My child, take these cakes and eat them on your way. It's still 10 miles to the temple." Milan also got up early and silently checked whether the knots in his son's bundle were secure. The shepherd seemed to have aged overnight, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes were particularly deep in the morning light. Finally, he patted his son on the shoulder and said only one sentence. "Remember, you are the shepherd's son. Sheep know the way home, they will always remember." At 5 o'clock sharp, Philos shouldered his luggage and glanced at his sleeping brother one last time. Not long after, he turned around, pushed open the door, and stepped into the chill of the early morning. The village was still asleep, and only his footsteps echoed on the stone path. The air was cool and moist, carrying the scent of dew and olive leaves. Finally, he looked back at the home he had lived in for 16 years. Rough stone walls, smoke-blackened beams, farm tools piled in the corner, and faded wool blankets hanging on the wall. All of this felt so familiar it made my heart tremble, yet so strange it felt like a memory from a past life. "Dear father and mother, I'm leaving," he said, looking at his parents. Kalia suddenly rushed over, hugged him tightly, and kissed him on the forehead, a blessing from an ancient Greek mother to her son going to war. She finally couldn't hold back her tears, which dripped onto his clothes, leaving dark stains. Seeing this, Milan simply nodded and turned to check the bolt on the sheep pen. Philos walked through the familiar alley, past the Hermes statue at the village entrance. Traces of last night's revelry still lingered, withered wreaths and empty wine jugs scattered at the statue's feet. After leaving the village, there is a dirt road heading south, winding along the coastline. As dawn broke, the sea changed from inky black to deep blue, and then took on the first touch of golden red. Philos quickened his pace, his coarse cloth shoes making a rustling sound on the sandy road. Philos' thoughts. 10 miles, which would take about an hour to walk in this day and age. I had to get to the temple for morning prayers before 7:30, there was enough time, but I couldn't be late. He walked along, observing the dawn of the world. The climate here is similar to that of the Mediterranean Sea in his previous life, but the vegetation is denser and the energy in the air is more concentrated. It's not an illusion, he really felt a slight tingling sensation on his skin, like static electricity or like something invisible was flowing. The world in the mythological era was indeed different. As he passed an olive grove, he saw several early rising farmers already at work. Upon seeing the badge on Philos' shoulder, they all stopped what they were doing and bowed respectfully. Philos returned the greeting politely, continuing his walk. This is the change in status. Yesterday he was just an ordinary shepherd boy, today he is God-blessed, representing the face of the temple. After walking for about half an hour, it became bright daylight. The sun leaps from the sea, its golden light instantly filling the world. Philos stopped on a high slope, took out a water pouch from his pocket, took a sip of water, and looked down at the view before him. The topography of Callisto Island is laid out clearly from here. To the north are the hills where their village is located, to the south are the temple district and the main port, to the east lies the vast Aegean Sea, and to the west, the outline of a larger landmass can be vaguely seen, that must be the Greek mainland. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual on the sea. About 3 miles away on the sea, a silvery white band of light broke through the waves and extended toward the island at an incredible speed. Where the light band passed, the seawater parted to both sides, forming a brief passage. Although it was fleeting, Philos was certain he hadn't misread it. Philo's inner thoughts. Was that a miracle? Or the passing of some sea deity? In this world, the supernatural is part of everyday life. I must get used to it, but I must also record, analyze, and look for patterns. He noted down the time, location, and characteristics of the phenomenon, and continued on his way. At 6:45, the road began to go uphill. The temple complex is built on a high point overlooking the sea, and the white buildings gleam in the morning light. As he approached, Philos finally got a clear look at the size of the area. At the center is the Temple of Apollo, which, though not as grand as Delphi's, is still quite substantial. 12 Doric columns support a triangular pediment, and the cornice is carved with reliefs of a sun chariot. The smaller Temple of Hermes is on the left, and the Temple of Poseidon is on the right. The three temples enclosed a plaza paved with neatly cut marble slabs. There were already quite a few people in the square at this time. Priests in white robes hurried by, several God-blessed young men were wiping the altar, and a few craftsmen were repairing the broken stone steps. Philos straightened his robes, took a deep breath, and walked toward the main entrance of the Temple of Apollo. He was stopped by a young priest at the steps. "Stop. Who are you? What brings you to the temple so early?" Philos immediately presented the badge. "I am the newly appointed God-blessed Philos, here to report for duty this morning on the orders of Priest Leon." The young priest examined the badge carefully, then looked him over, a hint of surprise in his eyes. Clearly, it was a rare thing for a 16-year-old boy of shepherd's origin to become God-blessed. "Oh, it's you. Go in, Tilda. Morning prayers are held in the main hall, starting at 7 a.m. Please do not be late." After he finished speaking, he stepped aside to make way for him. The moment Philos stepped across the threshold of the temple, he felt a slight dizziness. It's not physiological, but rather a kind of spatial dislocation. It felt as if I had stepped into a separate realm rather than a building. The air is fresher, the light is softer, and even the sounds have a peculiar echo. The interior of the main hall is even more solemn than its exterior. The towering dome is painted with a star map, and the four walls are covered with murals depicting the miracles of Apollo, slaying Peton, racing against Martheus, and driving the chariot of the sun. In the very center is a marble statue of Apollo, about 3 meters tall, holding a lyre, with a solemn expression. There were already more than a dozen people kneeling in front of the statue. On the left are 6 priests, including Leon, on the right are 8 young men, who should be the other God-blessed. At Leon's signal, Philos quietly walked to the end of the God-blessed line and knelt down. He quickly surveyed the other God-blessed people around him. The closest person to him was a chestnut-haired boy, about 17 years old, with delicate features, who was praying softly with his eyes closed. Further ahead were 2 girls, one blonde and one brown, both dressed in simple robes. In the front row were 3 slightly older young men, around 20 years old, with dignified bearing, clearly seasoned God-blessed. Everyone had one thing in common: they were well-dressed, had an elegant demeanor, and clearly came from well-educated families. Philos, a shepherd boy dressed in a coarse robe with skin slightly darkened from years of herding, stood out conspicuously among them. He could feel several gazes fixed on him, some curious, some scrutinizing, and some undisguised contempt. Philos' thoughts. Human civilization has existed for thousands of years, and class issues are indeed everywhere. But it's okay, it's all expected. What I need to do is not to integrate into them, but to surpass them. At 7 a.m. sharp, morning prayers began. An old priest with white hair walked up to the statue and lit the incense burner. The sweet fragrance of bay leaves filled the air. He raised his hands and began to chant a hymn, an ancient melody in Old Greek. Philos could barely understand some of the words, but the gist was that it praised Apollo for bringing light, dispelling darkness, and bestowing music and healing. All the priests and God-blessed then repeated the specific passages. Philos could only recite silently, but his pronunciation was surprisingly accurate, thanks to his previous life study of Old Greek. Although the pronunciation may differ from that of this era, the basic framework was correct. The chanting lasted for about 15 minutes. As the ceremony concluded, sunlight streamed in through a high window on the east side of the temple, illuminating the face of the Apollo statue. The marble seemed to come alive instantly, gleaming with a warm luster. "The light has come, the new sun has risen," old priest declared. "May the wisdom of Apollo guide our thoughts and actions today." The morning prayers ended, and the crowd dispersed. Leon walked over and whispered to Philos, "Come with me, I'll show you today's schedule." They walked out of the main hall and came to a notice board on one side of the corridor. The board was covered with a densely packed course schedule written in charcoal. 7:30 to 9 o'clock. Basic Reading and Writing, Beginner Class, Literary Study, Advanced Class. 9 o'clock to 10:30. Arithmetic and Geometry. 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m. Music Theory, Elementary, Lyre Practice, Advanced. Afternoon. Temple Duty Shift. 1500 to 1700 Free Study. Evening Prayer, 1700 to 1900. Philos, you're in the beginner's class, Leon said, pointing to the timetable. The morning classes are in the East Lecture Hall. This afternoon's practical shift is today. You've been assigned to the library to assist with organizing books. Philos nodded and made a note of it. Also, Leon lowered his voice, Priestess Arya instructed me to have you go to her after lunch. She was in Laurel Forest, the back garden of the temple. Philos' inner thoughts. What? Cupid actually arranged for us to meet before our first 7-day promise. I wonder what kind of test this capricious goddess will give me. Tilda. At 7:30, Philos entered the East Lecture Hall on time. This is a rectangular room with tall windows on both sides and a dozen or so low tables and cushions in the middle. 7 or 8 students had already arrived, all of them in the same beginner class as him, God blessed, including the chestnut-haired boy and the 2 girls he had seen during morning prayers. The lecturer was a middle-aged priestess named Thea, with a serious face, holding a pointer and a wax tablet. Welcome, new God blessed. Please have a seat. She gestured to an empty seat. Today we will continue learning the alphabet and basic grammar. Turn over your wax tablets. Philos received a blank wax tablet and a stylus. The priest of Thea began writing the ancient Greek alphabet on the blackboard, explaining its pronunciation and the correct stroke order. This was too easy for Philos. He was already fluent in Old Greek in his previous life. But he deliberately slowed down, imitating other beginners, and clumsily carved on the wax tablet. During the break between classes, the chestnut-haired boy came over. My name is Lycas. He smiled kindly. You're Philos, who was selected yesterday. I heard you answered the riddle correctly. Philos nodded politely in acknowledgement. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lycas. I was just lucky in yesterday's selection. This isn't just luck. Lycas lowered his voice. That riddle, my father, who was the island scribe, thought about it for a long time and still couldn't figure it out. He said the correct answer was actually language, which was incredibly brilliant. It's not something an average person would think of. Your father was a clerk. Philos noticed that Lycas's clothes, though made of simple fabric, were finely crafted, suggesting she came from a middle-class family. Yes, that's why he insisted on sending me to the temple to study, saying I could take over his job someday. Lycas sighed. Actually, I prefer music. And you, what does your family do? Shepherd. Lycas paused for a moment, then said sincerely. That's even more amazing. From shepherd to God blessed. You must be very smart. Philos' thoughts. This Lycas is either genuinely innocent and kind, or she's extremely good at pretending. Either way, it's worth getting to know her for now. The words had barely left his mouth when the bells outside rang. Lycas, we have to go to class now. See you another time. Okay, Philos, see you later. The morning classes proceeded as scheduled. Philos continued to hide his ignorance during the arithmetic class, which focused on basic counting and fractions. However, he was genuinely interested in the music theory class, which covered scales and modes. He asked several insightful questions, earning him a second glance from the priest lecturing on the subject. At midday, the temple offers a simple lunch, porridge, olives, cheese, and a little grilled fish. The God-blessed gathered at the restaurant for a meal and naturally split into small groups. Philos and Lycas sat together, along with the blonde girl named Chris, the daughter of a wealthy merchant, and the brunette girl named Daphne, whose father was a ship owner. Both men were very curious about Philos and asked him many questions about herding life. What do you usually do when you're herding sheep? Chris's eyes widened. Just sit on the grass and watch them graze. Not only that, Philos made up on the spot, you have to remember the characteristics of each sheep, which one is easy to get lost, and which one likes to fight. You need to observe the weather, know when to move your grazing area, and also be wary of wolves and thieves. That sounds tough, Daphne said softly. But it's also very free. Philos said, sitting on the hill, looking at the sea and the sky, sometimes I feel. You are small, but also very important. the sheep depend on you, your family depends on you. These words silenced the three teenagers. Although they come from relatively privileged backgrounds, they rarely think about the feeling of being needed. After lunch, Philos went to Laurel Forest, the back garden of the temple, as instructed. This is a meticulously maintained garden, filled with laurel trees, with stone paths and small fountains in the middle. Afternoon sunlight filters through the leaves, casting dappled shadows, and the air is filled with the distinctive, slightly bitter fragrance of laurel. Aphrodite, or Priestess Arya, stood under the largest laurel tree, with her back to him. Today she was wearing a formal priestess robe, her golden hair styled in a neat bun, but her figure was still so graceful that she seemed otherworldly. "Oh, little one, you're here." She didn't turn around. "How was your first day?" "Everything is fulfilling, Priestess Arya." Philos maintained a respectful distance. "Just call me Arya. There's no need to stand on ceremony in private." She turned around, a half-smile on her face, and said, "Sit down. Tell me about your one-year plan." The two sat down on a stone bench under the tree. Cupid took a roll of parchment from his sleeve and slowly unrolled it. "I've thought about it carefully. If you want to W in my favor, then you need to have specific criteria. These are the conditions I proposed." Philos took the parchment, on which was written in beautiful handwriting. Academic achievements. Pass all beginner-level exams within 3 months to advance to the advanced level. Master at least 2 musical instruments, lyre, aulos, or harp within 6 months. Complete an original poem or musical work within 9 months and gain the temple's approval. 2. Practical skills. Receive an excellent rating at least 3 times during temple duty rotations. Independently plan and execute a small-scale sacrificial or celebratory event. Resolve a real dispute either within the temple or involving believers. 3. Reputation accumulation. On Callisto Island, make sure at least 100 people know your name and deeds. To receive public praise from at least one nobleman or wealthy merchant. Complete a deed, no matter how small, that will be sung by bards. IV. Special test. Through a trial of Cupid, personally designed by me, time and content to be determined. Philos finished reading, looked up, and said, "The conditions are very specific, but what if I meet them all? If you can accomplish more than 8 of these," Aphrodite's eyes flashed with gold, "I will not only grant you the title of Cupid's favorite, but also give you a real reward, a divine promise that can be fulfilled at crucial moments." "What kind of promise?" "That depends on what you need," she smiled. "It could be shelter, it could be knowledge, or it could be a wish." "Of course, within my authority." Philos pondered for a moment. "My goddess, I accept all of this. But there are 2 additions." "Go ahead and say it, little one." "First, I need certain resources to support me, not through superhuman strength, but through reasonable convenience. For example, access to the temple's library and opportunities to meet more people." "Yes, I will make things easier for you under the guise of priest special permission." "Second, the content of the trial must not endanger my life or fundamental principles." Aphrodite chuckled and said, "Don't worry, I just wanted to have some fun, not kill anyone." "So now, the contract is established." "Contract established." A faint light suddenly appeared between the two of them, not visual, but a kind of sensory flash. Philos felt a slight warmth on the inside of his wrist. Looking down, he saw a pale golden rose mark appear on his skin before disappearing. "This is the mark of the contract," Aphrodite explained. "It is visible only to you and me. It will track your progress and, when necessary, remind you of our agreement." She stood up, the shadow of a bay leaf swaying on her face. "All right, the first meeting is over. You can now take turns working at the library. Remember, in 7 days, report back to me in the same room where we met before." "No problem, Your Majesty," the goddess Tilda. Philos, knowing his place, gave her a charming smile, then bowed and took his leave. Upon seeing this, Cupid merely gave a haughty snort. As he walked out of Laurel Forest, he looked back. Aphrodite still stood under the tree, looking up at the sunlight filtering through the leaves. In that instant, she was no longer a disguised priestess, nor a bewitching goddess of love, but rather, a solitary observer. Philos thoughts. Does God also feel lonely? Perhaps immortality itself is the longest imprisonment. The library is located in the west wing of the temple complex and is a separate 2-story stone building. Philos pushed open the door, and a rich, scholarly atmosphere greeted him. The room was larger than I had imagined, with bookshelves stretching from the floor to the ceiling, piled high with scrolls, papyrus, and wax tablets. Several God-blessed people were organizing books, and an old priest sat behind a table at the entrance, wearing glasses and intently copying something. "You're new here, aren't you?" Old priest asked without looking up. "I'm Sophocles, the librarian. Your task today is to sort and register the newly arrived batch of donated books." He pointed to a pile of wooden crates in the corner. There are about 50 volumes there, divided into 5 categories according to content: mythology, history, poetry, philosophy, and practical skills. Each volume must have a summary label and record donor information. Philos walked up to the wooden crates and opened the first one. Inside were all sorts of books, some beautifully bound, others worn and tattered. He picked up the first volume and carefully unfolded it. It is a fragment from Iliad, neatly copied, but with several obvious typos. The second volume contains nautical star charts, marked with various constellations and sailing seasons. Volume 3 contains medical manuscripts recording herbal formulas. Suddenly, his finger stopped on a particularly worn roll of papyrus. The edges of the roll of paper were charred and curled, as if it had been burned, but the words in the middle were still barely legible. Even more strangely, the script is not Old Greek, but another, even older linear script, Linear B, which is the writing system of the Mycenaean civilization. Philos's heart skipped a beat. The Linear B algorithm was not deciphered until the 20th century in the previous era, so it should have been lost long ago in this era. Why would it appear in a donated scroll from an island temple? He carefully unfolded the tattered scroll and examined it closely by the light from the window. The text was incomplete, but he could barely recognize a few recurring symbols, symbols of the name of God. Zeus, Hera, Poseidon. There's also a string of symbols that seems to be a place name, or an oracle. "What interesting thing did you find?" Sophocles' voice suddenly rang out from behind. Philos was startled, but quickly regained his composure. "High priest, this scroll. I can't quite understand it, it doesn't seem to be Greek." Old priest took the tattered scroll, squinted at it for a long time, and said, "Ah, this. This was unearthed from an ancient site on the west side of the island. It was donated by a businessman who said it was an antique. But I've studied it, and the script is long gone. It's probably a record from barbarian tribes. Could I borrow it for research?" Philos blurted out. "I'm very interested in ancient things." Sophocles sized him up. "You have studied philology. I know a little bit about it. When I was herding sheep, I often observed the ancient carvings on the rocks." The explanation was far-fetched, but old priest didn't seem to care. "Well, nobody can understand it anyway. But don't lose it, be sure to note it clearly when registering." "Thank you, Your Excellency." Philos carefully set the surviving scroll aside. He sensed that this scroll might be key, not just linguistically, but more likely the key to understanding the deep history of the world. In the time that followed, he secretly memorized the symbol for Linear B while organizing the books. Some symbols were already deciphered in previous lives, while others were completely unfamiliar. But what concerned him most was a line of small characters at the end of the fragment, written in Old Greek, but with archaic grammar. "On the day of the syzygy of 3 stars, the slumbering will awaken, the old vows will be renewed, and a new order will be born from chaos." Syzygy of 3 stars, an astronomical phenomenon. Who is the sleeper? What is the old oath? Philos kept this sentence in mind. He had a vague feeling that this was more than just an antique or a prophecy. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why Aphrodite chose this era, this place, and even him. The library bell rang. It was already late afternoon. Philos completed the classification and registration of the 20 volumes, and separately wrapped the fragment of Linear B before handing it over to Sophocles for registration. As he left the library, the sun was setting. He stood in the corridor, watching the temple's shadow stretch longer and longer across the square. On the first day, from 5 a.m. to evening, the amount of information far exceeded expectations. Identity transformation, class differences, Cupid's covenant, a mysterious linear script, obscure prophecies. Philos's inner thoughts. "This pool is deeper than I imagined, but deep waters hold big fish. Aphrodite, you want to see my abilities? Then I'll show you what a history graduate student can achieve in the mythical age." He walked towards the God-blessed dormitory with firm steps. The laurel leaves rustled in the evening breeze, as if whispering ancient secrets. Deep within Laurel Forest, Aphrodite gazed at the faintly visible rose mark on his wrist, a meaningful smile playing on his lips. You found the fragments of the linear script on the very first day. Little guy, your luck and keenness have exceeded my expectations. I'm liking this game more and more. As night falls, Callisto Island drifts into slumber. A real game will lead everyone in unexpected directions. The chill of the early morning seeped into the stone walls. When Philos opened his eyes on the hard bed, the temple bells had not yet rung. He stared at the shadowy outline of the ceiling, going over yesterday's information in his mind, the linear B fragments, the covenant terms of Cupid, and the class differences in God Blessed. The rose mark on the inside of his wrist gleamed faintly with a golden light in the darkness. It was a contractual mark that only he and Aphrodite could see. Philos' thoughts. I've managed to get a foothold on my first day at the temple, but the real challenge is underway. The game of Cupid, the temple's learning, the secrets of linear scripts. I'm juggling 3 things at once, and I can't afford to make a mistake on any of them. He sat up abruptly and, using the gradually brightening light from the window, quickly wrote down his plans for the day on the wax tablet. 1. After morning prayers, find priest Sophocles and try to formally borrow the fragments of the linear script. 2. The beginner class maintained a slightly above average performance, neither outstanding nor lagging behind. 3. Observe other God-blessed individuals to identify potential allies and adversaries. 4. Begin memorizing linear script notation and attempt to decipher the fragments. As the bell rang, Philos put away his wax tablet and dressed neatly. The bronze badge gleamed with a cold luster in the morning light. At the same time, in a faraway place, Aphrodite reclines on a golden couch in Mount Olympus's palace, with a water mirror floating in front of him. Philos' profile was reflected in the mirror as he wrote in the dimly lit room. The boy's focused expression was particularly clear in the morning light. Cupid's inner voice. You're awake so early. Don't mortals crave warm blankets? Hey, you're quite diligent in your studies. Let's see what tricks you have up your sleeve today. With a light tap of her fingertip, the water mirror image switched to the temple corridor. Several young God-blessed people were talking in hushed tones, their eyes occasionally glancing toward the corner where Philos was about to appear. I heard that shepherd boy spent the whole day in the library yesterday. It's all just an act. What can a shepherd possibly understand? After a while, Aphrodite's red lips curled into a cold smile. Eros's inner voice. You foolish ants. You have no idea what kind of being you are mocking, Tilda, but it's good. Let him suffer a little so he can understand who he should look up to. After morning prayers, Philos was about to go to the library when he was suddenly stopped by Lycus, a chestnut-haired boy. Philos, wait a minute. Lycus lowered his voice. There's something I need to remind you. Callimachus from the advanced class, the one in the purple-trimmed robe during yesterday's selection, said he'd teach you a lesson. Philos raised an eyebrow and said, Why, I have no grudge against him. You stole his thunder, Lycus said helplessly. Callimachus is the son of a wealthy businessman on the island, and he thought he had the God-blessed spot in his pocket this year. And then you, a shepherd, suddenly appeared out of nowhere and even won the favor of Priestess Arya. So he felt he lost face. Not only that, Lycus looked around, his voice even lower. I heard that he originally wanted to get close to Priestess Arya through his God-blessed identity. The priestess is known for her beauty in the area. Now that you've attracted so much attention since you arrived, he naturally sees you as a thorn in his side. Philos nodded. Thank you for reminding me. By the way, wasn't he not selected as God-blessed? Why is he still able to come to the temple to study? Philos asked. That's because his family paid a high amount of tribute to the temple, which earned them the opportunity to be recommended for admission. Lycus sighed. So you have to be careful, Lycus said sincerely. Also, Callimachus has some connections in the temple. His uncle is the deputy priest of the Temple of Hermes. Okay, I'll be careful. Philos fell into deep thought as he watched Lycus walk away. Philos' thoughts. A classic version of school bullying. It seems no era can escape it. But it's good this way. Having a clear opponent is always better than being caught off guard by a sneak attack. He turned and headed toward the library, but was stopped at the corner of the corridor. 3 people stood there, Callimachus in the middle, flanked by 2 followers. It was the same group of brown-haired youths who had provoked them during yesterday's selection process. Oh, isn't this our shepherding genius? Callimachus said sarcastically, arms crossed. So eager to curry favor with the priest. Philos stopped and looked at him calmly. Oh, is there something you need? Of course. Callimachus stepped forward. I'm a person who values fairness the most. It's unfair that a shepherd like you managed to sneak into the temple by luck, which is unfair to others who have worked hard for many years. Therefore, I think you should voluntarily withdraw. Why? For this. Callimachus patted the hilt of the short sword at his waist. Although fighting was forbidden within the temple, the sword itself was a symbol of status, and for this. He pointed to his 2 henchmen behind him. These are my 2 friends, the Temple of Poseidon and the Temple of Hermes, God blessed. How long do you think someone who has offended 3 temples can stay here? Philos was silent for 3 seconds, then suddenly laughed. The smile was faint, yet it inexplicably made Callimachus's heart tighten. You're right, it's definitely not fair. Philos said slowly, you gain an advantage by relying on your family background, your connections, and by threatening others. This is really unfair to a shepherd like me who can only rely on himself. Callimachus's expression changed. But that's all right, Philos interrupted him. Since you think it's unfair, we can find a fair way to compete. 3 days later is the monthly God-blessed debate, the topic of which is closer to divinity, wisdom or power. Do you dare to have a contest of skill on that? Callimachus was stunned. The God-blessed debate is a temple tradition, presided over by the high priest, and attended by all those who have been God-blessed. The victor not only wins honor, but may also receive special guidance from the priest. He did prepare a debate topic, but he didn't expect Philos to take the initiative to challenge him. Where did a shepherd who had only been there for 2 days get his confidence? What, you don't dare? Philos raised an eyebrow. Or are you only brave enough to ambush people in the corridors, but not in a formal setting? People had already stopped to watch. Seeing this, Callimachus knew he was in a bind and could only bite the bullet and say, fine, in 3 days, I'll make you lose face in front of everyone. I'll be watching. Philos sidestepped them and headed straight for the library. Callimachus stared at his retreating figure, his fists clenched. Before the water mirror, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, laughed out loud. Eros's thoughts. A debate challenge. How interesting. That idiot Callimachus prepared his speech for half a month, thinking he had victory in the bag. Unfortunately, he has no idea what kind of mind he's facing. She lazily shifted her posture, and the water mirror image followed Philos into the library. Boy and old priest. After a brief conversation, Sophocles successfully borrowed the fragment of the linear script. Eros's thoughts. Linear B. This kid has a sharp eye. There are indeed some interesting things hidden in that fragment, but, even I can only understand about 70%. Can a 16-year-old shepherd really decipher it? In the scene, Philos did not immediately study the tattered scrolls, but instead completed today's sorting work first. All 50 volumes of donated books were classified and registered, the summaries were written in a clear and organized manner, and he even corrected 2 obvious classification errors. The priest Sophocles raised an eyebrow in surprise as he inspected the area. Eros's thoughts. I never expected him to be so efficient. And he knows to complete his work first before dealing with personal matters. This composure is unlike that of a 16-year-old. The afternoon sun shone through the library's high windows, casting diamond-shaped patches of light on the stone floor. Philos finally sat down in the corner and unrolled the charred, tattered scroll. His finger hovered over the words, not touching them, but examining them carefully. The water mirror couldn't reveal the focus in his eyes, but Aphrodite could see his lips moving silently, as if he were reciting something. Eros's voice. He's trying to decipher it, really trying. It doesn't seem like he's just pretending, he's methodically comparing symbols. Interesting, so interesting. Where did a shepherd learn text deciphering skills? Aphrodite sat up straight and lightly traced the surface of the water mirror with his fingertips. The image in the mirror zooms in, focusing on Philos's fingers, those slender fingers rapidly scribbling on the wax tablet, not writing Greek letters but some strange symbols. That's the syllable chart for Linear B. He used the deciphering results from his past life memories to deduce the variant of this world in reverse. Eros's voice. What is he writing? Some kind of code. No. The arrangement is like a syllable chart. How is that possible? This script was lost when the Mycenaean civilization collapsed, and even the old scholars of the priesthood only recognized 1 or 2 symbols. Aphrodite's golden eyes narrowed slightly, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. For the first time, she felt genuine curiosity about this mortal boy, not the curiosity of playing with prey, but the curiosity to explore its essence. The library bells roused Philos from his reverie. He looked up and realized it was already 3:45 p.m. The wax tablet in front of me was covered with symbols and derivation processes. Deciphering linear B was more complicated than he had anticipated. The version in this world differed slightly from the one in his previous life, resembling a dialect variant. But the core rules are the same. After 3 hours of comparison, he had deciphered 1/3 of the contents of the tattered scroll. Most of the records are sacrificial records. In a certain year and month, 3 bulls were sacrificed to Zeus, and 2 cows were sacrificed to Hera. But there was one part in the middle that he was particularly concerned about. On the night of the syzygy of 3 stars, the gate to the land of slumber will open. The holder of the seal of the old oath may relive the ancient covenant. Where is the sleeping land? And what is the seal of the old oath? More importantly, this text is written in a prophetic style, but in a manner resembling a sacrificial log. Philos thoughts. This set of fragments is not simple. On the surface, it is a record of rituals, but it contains prophecy. And, revisiting the ancient covenant, could it refer to some ancient agreement between gods and humans? He then carefully rolled up the tattered scroll and erased the notes on the wax tablet. This knowledge could not be revealed yet. As I left the library, the sun was setting. In the corridor, he encountered Priestess Arya, or rather, Aphrodite in disguise. Philos, she called out to him, her tone solemn like a priestess, but a golden glint flashed deep in her eyes. I heard you challenged Callimachus to a debate. Yes, Lady Arya. Well, commendable courage, she said, taking a few steps closer and lowering her voice, but did you know that Callimachus's uncle is the lower priest of the Temple of Hermes? 3 days later, at the debate, he was one of the 3 judges. Philos understood immediately. So, the referee might be biased. Not just possibly, it's definitely possible. Aphrodite looked him straight in the eye. But if you need me, I can. I don't need to. Philos interrupted her, his tone firm and resolute. My goddess, if I can't even handle this level of favoritism, then I'm not worthy to play this game with you. Aphrodite paused for a moment, then smiled. This time it was a genuine laugh, not a fake one. Okay, she said. Then I'll look forward to your performance in 3 days. But remember, if we lose too badly, I'll be very disappointed. I won't let you down. As the two passed each other, Aphrodite said in a voice only he could hear. Is the content of the fragment interesting? Philos paused in his steps. Very interesting, he replied, especially the part about the old vows. Then let's study it carefully. The god of love left these words behind, his white robe swept across the stone corridor, and he vanished around the corner in an instant. Philos' inner thoughts. She actually knew I was studying the fragments. Indeed, everything was under her watchful eye. But was that, study it well, encouragement? Or a hint? That evening, Philos organized his debate ideas under the oil lamp in his dormitory. Which is closer to divinity, wisdom or power, a typical philosophical debate in ancient Greece. Callimachus would definitely choose power, because it aligns with mainstream values. Zeus rules with thunder, Ares demonstrates power through war, and Poseidon displays divine strength through tsunamis. But Philos does not intend to choose wisdom. He wants to choose neither of the two. Balance is divinity. This angle was risky, but surprisingly effective. He spread out the new wax tablet and began to list his arguments. 1. The essence of a deity is not a single attribute, but a balance of multiple powers. Taking Apollo as an example, he is both the god of light and the god of plague, embodying the balance between creation and destruction. 2. Wisdom without power to execute it is empty talk. Power without wisdom to guide it is disaster. Trojan War, for example, Achilles, power and Odysseus, wisdom were both indispensable. 3. True divinity is manifested in maintaining the balance of the universe, the alternation of day and night, the cycle of the seasons, and the cycle of life and death. Quoting Hesiod's description of the primordial gods' chaos and order in his Theogony. 4. Mortals who pursue divinity should not unilaterally imitate one aspect of God, but rather pursue inner harmony. The Pythagoras school's idea that harmony is virtue, although Pythagoras himself did not exist at this time, it can be packaged as ancient wisdom. Philos stopped writing at this point. Philos's thoughts. The 4th point is too audacious. It's practically challenging the absolute boundary between gods and humans. But isn't that exactly what Aphrodite wanted to see? A clear-headed mortal, daring to question and think. He decided to keep it. The oil lamp crackled, and the chirping of night birds drifted in from outside the window. Philos rubbed his sore eyes and looked at his wrist. The rose mark was faintly visible in the dim light. The debate 3 days later will be his first public appearance in the world. We absolutely cannot lose, not only for herself, but also to prove to that observer that she had chosen not just a pretty face. Rather, it is a rough gem that is being sculpted. On the other side, Mount Olympus, Temple of Love. Aphrodite leans against the edge of the hot spring pool, rose petals floating on the water. She closed her eyes, but the images from the daytime kept replaying in her mind. Philo's focused profile in the library, Philo's calmness in the face of provocation, and the look in Philo's eyes when he said, "I am not worthy to play this game with you." Eros's voice. Balance is divinity. An interesting point. Even Athena wouldn't dare say that publicly. Is this little guy truly bold, or does he simply not know fear? She opened her eyes, her fingertips tracing the surface of the water. Ripples spread out, reflecting their own exquisite image. Eternal beauty, eternal life, eternal boredom. The gods' reign was so long that even instigating the Trojan War was merely a game to pass the time. But this ordinary boy is different. He was clear-headed, he was bold, he was like a pebble thrown into a stagnant pool, arousing a curiosity she hadn't felt in a long time. Philos. She murmured the name as if savoring some novel fruit. She will personally attend the debate 3 days from now. Not as Priestess Arya, but concealed, she sat on the beam of the temple. She wanted to see how many ripples this pebble could create. We should also see whether those things slumbering deep in time will awaken as the ripples spread. Aphrodite stood up from the water droplets sliding down in perfect curves. She walked to the terrace on the west side of the palace and looked down at the myriad lights of the world below. In the direction of Callisto Island, a faint light flickers in the darkness. It is the eternal flame of the Temple of Apollo. Eros's voice. The days of syzygy of 3 stars are almost here. Old vows will awaken, a new order will be born. Little one, don't let me down. In this game, you are the true protagonist. The night breeze blew, lifting her long golden hair. This goddess, a symbol of love and beauty, gave off a smile that was both expectant and dangerous. On the morning of the debate, Philos met Lycus by the fountain in Temple Square. The chestnut-haired boy had faint dark circles under his eyes, clearly indicating that he hadn't slept well last night. "I've heard the news," Lycus said in a low voice. "Callimachus has prepared 3 speeches and bribed the judges of the Temple of Hermes. Worse still, many of his family members are in the audience today and will likely heckle you while you speak." Philos scooped up a handful of spring water to wash his face, the cool droplets sliding down his jawline. 3 speeches. He raised an eyebrow. He's planning to cover every possible angle. Yes, one article focuses on power as divinity, another on wisdom guides power, and there's another, supposedly a rebuttal to the balance theory, you might use. Philos' thoughts. Well prepared. However, a debate is not a memorized speech contest. The real winner is the one who can adapt to the situation. Thank you for the information. Philos patted Lycus on the shoulder. Don't worry, I'm prepared. Are you really sure? Lycus asked worriedly. Callimachus may be arrogant, but he is indeed well educated. His father invited scholars from Athens to teach him for 2 whole years. Philos did not answer, but simply looked towards the other end of the square. Callimachus was being escorted by several attendants, his long robe with purple trim standing out in the morning light. He deliberately slowed his pace, and when his gaze swept over Philos, a confident smile appeared on his lips. Look at him, Lycus sighed, he already thinks he's won. Then let him enjoy the illusion of victory for a little longer. The debate was held in the main hall of the Temple of Apollo. This was not a formal place for sacrificial rites, but rather a side hall used for teaching and gatherings. The stone steps surrounding the seats on 3 sides can accommodate more than 100 people, and at this moment they are more than half full. God blessed, low priests, and even a few prominent citizens of the island have come. 2 wooden lecterns were placed in the center of the hall, about 5 steps apart. Directly in front were 3 high-backed chairs, where 3 referees were seated. The Temple of Apollo is represented by Priest Leon, the Temple of Hermes is represented by Callimachus's uncle, a thin, serious middle-aged priest named Dimitri, and the Temple of Poseidon is represented by an old man with white hair, who is said to be known for his justice. Aphrodite did not sit in a prominent position. But Philos knew she was there, perhaps disguised as a listener, or perhaps she was sitting on the beam, completely hidden. He could feel that gaze, like a feather, sweep across the back of his neck. Quiet. Priest Leon rose and rang the bronze bell in his hand. Today's debate topic. Which is closer to divinity, wisdom or power? The affirmative side, Callimachus, argues for the power is supreme. The negative side, Philos, argues for the balance is essential. Each party has 3 incense sticks worth of time to present their case, after which they may question each other. The referee will ultimately decide the winner. Callimachus was the first to step onto the podium. He was clearly dressed up today, his long hair tied up with a gold ring, and a beautifully decorated short sword at his waist, a clear violation of the rules, as weapons should not be brought into the debate, but no one pointed it out. Respected referee, congratulations. Callimachus's voice was loud and clear, with a well-trained intonation. What do we see when we look up at Olympus? We see Zeus wielding thunder, awe-inspiring among the gods. We see Poseidon swinging his trident, unleashing towering waves. We see Ares clad in armor, invincible. He spread his arms wide in an exaggerated gesture. Power. Unrivaled power. This is the true nature of divinity. Wisdom. It's nothing but a weak excuse for mortals in the face of power. No matter how strong Troy's walls are, can they stop Achilles' spears? Even if Hector were wise, could he defeat Diomedes, empowered by Athena? The opening remarks drew applause, especially from the seats reserved for his family. Callimachus glanced at Philos smugly and continued. Why is Apollo the god of prophecy? Because his arrows can bring plague and death. Why is Athena called goddess of wisdom? Because she was born from Zeus's head and possessed innate divine power. Wisdom depends on strength, not the other way around. Therefore, I say that strength is the quality closest to divinity. His speech was indeed of high quality, full of quotations and passionate. By the time the 3 incense sticks had burned out, the atmosphere had been stirred up, and many people nodded in agreement. It's Philos' turn to take the stage. He walked up to the podium, but did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked around the room. His gaze was calm, his posture relaxed, a stark contrast to Callimachus's flamboyance. Callimachus, you're right, he began, his first words catching everyone off guard. Zeus's thunder, Poseidon's trident, Achilles' spear, these are indeed manifestations of power. Callimachus wore a victorious smile. But Philos changed the subject. Let's think about it. Why was Zeus able to become the king of the gods? Is it simply because his thunder are the strongest? No, it was also because he was wise. He united with his brothers and sisters to overthrow Kronos, he divided the power of the 3 realms to balance the gods, and he used strategy to resolve crisis after crisis. If he only possessed power, he would be nothing more than another brutal Kronos. Whispers could be heard from the guests. Poseidon can create huge waves, but why can't it flood the whole earth? Because Zeus set the limits. Ares is invincible, but why is he repeatedly defeated by Athena? Because the power of blind force is no match for wisdom. Philos's expression is clear and powerful. Therefore, I believe the question itself is flawed. We shouldn't ask, which is closer to divinity, wisdom or power? Instead, we should ask, what is true divinity? He paused, letting the question settle. True divinity is not the ultimate expression of a single attribute, but the harmonious unity of opposites. Day and night, life and death, creation and destruction, these oppositions achieve balance in the gods. Apollo is both the god of light and the god of plague. Athena is both the goddess of wisdom and the goddess of war. Aphrodite can bring love and also incite conflict. When the name of Cupid was mentioned, Philos felt the gaze on the back of his neck suddenly intensify. Divinity is like a bow, he said, making a drawing motion. The bow arm must be strong to shoot an arrow, and the bowstring must be resilient to hold power. Strength and wisdom are like the bow arm and the bowstring, neither can be lacking, and they complement each other. One-sided pursuit of power is barbarity, one-sided advocacy of wisdom is empty talk. Only when the two are balanced can one approach the true essence of divinity. He looked at the 3 referees, especially Dimitri. Your Honor, you serve the god Hermes. He is the god of commerce and travel, but also the god of theft and cunning. Does this mean that Hermes' divinity is flawed? No, this precisely demonstrates that true divinity can embrace contradictions and achieve harmony amidst opposition. Dimitri frowned. This boy dared to comment on the god he served in public. But Philos wasn't finished speaking. As for mortals pursuing divinity, we should not presume to become gods, but rather learn the balance within divinity. Farmers must balance cultivation and harvest, artisans must balance creativity and skill, and rulers must balance authority and benevolence. This balance is what we mortals should strive for most, the approaching divinity. The 3 incense sticks burned out perfectly. Philos finished speaking and bowed slightly. The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into an even more heated discussion than before. Lycus clenched his fists excitedly in the audience. Several priests who had initially been neutral nodded in agreement. Callimachus's face darkened. He hadn't expected Philos to completely break free from the wisdom versus power framework and propose a new approach, the theory of balance. This disrupted all his preparations. Priest Leon rings the bell. Now we will proceed to the questioning session. Callimachus, you can now ask Philos a question. Callimachus quickly composed himself, stood up, and asked, "You say balance is divine, then please tell me. When the Trojan War broke out, the gods each supported one side, where was the balance? When Zeus punished Prometheus, where was the balance then?" A very pointed question. Philos, unperturbed, replied. In the Trojan War, the gods were indeed divided, but Zeus ultimately maintained overall balance. He brought the war to an end at the appropriate time and restored order. As for Prometheus, he stole fire from mankind, breaking the boundary between gods and humans, which led to his punishment. Balance is not static, but dynamically adjusting. Those who disrupt the balance, whether gods or humans, will be subject to consequences. A silver tongue. Callimachus sneered, but you've overlooked one thing. In the end, it's strength that decides the outcome. Troy was breached by the Trojan horse, but the Trojan horse was able to enter the city because of the pressure of the Greek coalition's 10-year siege. Prometheus was chained to the cliff because he was no match for Zeus's power. Then let me ask you, Philos countered, who devised the Trojan horse? It was the wisdom of Odysseus. Why did Prometheus steal fire? To give humanity the wisdom of civilization. Without wisdom, power will only bring destruction, not construction. Callimachus, do you believe that a giant hammer that no one can wield is closer to divinity than a craftsman who can build houses? A low chuckle came from the audience. Callimachus was speechless for a moment. The questioning session continued in a stalemate. The two sides went back and forth, and Callimachus's prepared notes gradually became insufficient, so he began to repeat his arguments. Philos remained composed, always responding from a fresh perspective. Referee Dimitri's expression grew increasingly grim. As the last incense stick burned out, Priest Leon stood up. The debate is over. Now, I ask the judges to deliberate and make their decision. The 3 referees spoke in hushed tones. Dimitri clearly favors Callimachus. The white-haired old man remains neutral, while Leon supports Philos. Suddenly, an unexpected event occurred. A clear, ringing sound came from the dome of the hall, like the gentle tapping of a jade chime. Everyone looked up and saw a beam of sunlight shining through the high window, landing directly on Philos. Within the beam of light, fine dust particles danced like gold dust, enveloping him. In that instant, the boy seemed to exude a kind of extraordinary aura. This is a miracle. Many people gasped in surprise. Dimitri's words stuck in his throat. Aphrodite sat in the shadow of the beam, a wisp of golden light swirling around her fingertips. The perfect ray of sunlight from just moments before was her little help. Eros's voice. Enough, Dimitri. If you continue to show favoritism, you'll completely disgrace Hermes. The 3 referees reconsidered. A moment later, Priest Leon stood up and announced the results. The ruling concluded that Philos's arguments in this debate were more profound and innovative, demonstrating a deep reflection on the nature of divinity. Therefore, Philos is declared the winner. Applause broke out, initially sparse, then spreading out in waves. Callimachus, his face ashen, stormed off, surrounded by his family members. Philos stood in the pillar of light, slightly out of breath. He won, but it wasn't an easy victory. The last ray of sunlight came at just the right moment, clearly the intervention of some goddess. Well, in the game of the gods, there is never absolute fairness. After the debate, Philos was stopped by Priest Leon in the corridor. You did very well today, Leon said with approval in his eyes, but you should be more careful with your words in the future. Commenting on deities is not always tolerated. I understand, thank you for reminding me. Also, Leon lowered his voice, Priestess Arya wants you to go to Laurel Forest after your evening prayers. She said. She wanted to give you a reward. Philos's heart skipped a beat. Philos' inner thoughts. Hee, my goddess still favors me. I wonder what reward I'll get tonight, Tilda. The evening bells rang at dusk. As the last rays of the setting sun swept across the temple's columns, Philos once again stepped into Laurel Forest. Aphrodite, with his back to him, was teasing a white dove that had appeared out of nowhere. As the moonlight rose, it gilded her silhouette with a silver edge. Today's glory has come at just the right time, hasn't it? She said without turning her head. Was this your doing, Your Majesty? I just thought the scene was a bit boring and wanted to add some drama. She turned around, her eyes gleaming with golden light. However, your performance did exceed expectations. That, balance theory, was something even I hadn't considered. Your Majesty, I was merely expressing my own thoughts, some humble opinions. It's precisely because it's your own idea that it has more value. Aphrodite slowly approached, and a white dove flew away from her shoulder. Many mortals either blindly follow or rebel, and very few people truly think about what divinity is. You are different, Tilda. She reached out and traced her fingertips along Philos's jawline. This gesture carries the subtle boundary between the casualness of a deity and the intimacy of a mortal. So, I'm going to give you a reward, she said. Not the ones in the contract, but something extra. What's the reward? The answer to a question. Aphrodite looked him straight in the eye. You can ask me a question, any question, and I will answer truthfully, as long as it is within my knowledge. Philos's heart pounded with excitement. This is an opportunity, but also a test. He quickly thought, what are the weaknesses of the gods? Ask about the secrets of this world. Or should we ask about the truth of linear scripts? Ultimately, he chose the most direct and crucial option. I want to know, what does, on the night of the syzygy of 3 stars, the sleeper will awaken, mean? And who is the sleeper? Aphrodite's expression froze. Under the moonlight, her face momentarily lost all expression, like a cold statue. Where did you see this sentence? Her voice was soft, yet carried an invisible pressure. On the tattered scrolls in the library. That, linear script. Yes. A long silence. The night breeze rustled through Laurel Forest. Finally, Aphrodite spoke, his voice carrying a complex emotion Philos had never heard before. The sleepers are the Titans. Philos's breath hitched. Titans, the previous generation of gods of the Olympus race, who were defeated by Zeus and imprisoned in the abyss of Tartarus. Weren't the Titans imprisoned forever? He pressed. Imprisonment is not the same as annihilation. Aphrodite looked up at the night sky. Every 1,000 years, the stars will be in a special arrangement, and the seal on Tartarus will be temporarily weakened. Syzygy of 3 stars is one such moment. So the Titans managed to escape. Not entirely. She shook her head. A complete seal won't break, but some fragments, some echoes, might seep out. This is the true meaning of the awakening of the sleepers, not the Titans themselves, but the fragments of their power, the echoes of their memories that will affect the present world at this moment. Philos felt a chill run down his spine. Is this why you've appeared on Callisto Island? Because the syzygy of the 3 stars is about to arrive. Aphrodite did not answer directly, but simply said, remember, Philos, some knowledge is dangerous. The question you asked today has entered dangerous territory. But you promised to answer truthfully. Yes, I agreed. She suddenly smiled, a hint of weariness in her smile. So I will tell you more. The syzygy of 3 stars, on the winter solstice 11 months from now. Callisto Island will be one of the hardest hit areas. Why here? Because of this place. Aphrodite paused. It's an ancient battlefield, the site of the final battle between the Titans and the Olympus gods. Deep underground, an ancient seal is also buried. When the stars are aligned correctly, the seal will resonate. She stretched out her hand, palm up. Moonlight condensed in her hand, transforming into a translucent laurel leaf. Here you go. It will heat up as a warning when the echo appears. Carry it with you. It might help you distinguish between reality and illusion. Philos accepted the bay leaf. It is as light as a feather, yet its texture is as warm and smooth as jade. Why are you helping me? He asked. Aphrodite did not answer, but simply turned to look at the starry sky. After a long silence, she said softly, perhaps it's because, in the eternal life, I have finally encountered a variable worth looking forward to. After she finished speaking, her figure faded into the moonlight, as if melting into the night. Philos stood alone in Laurel Forest, holding the glowing leaf in his hand. In the distance, the temple bells rang, announcing the start of the curfew. A new crisis is on the way. Philos returned to his dorm with the laurel leaf, its light condensed from the moonlight, still in his head. Titans, seal, the arrangement of stars. This amount of information is indeed a bit overwhelming for a former shepherd boy who was memorizing the ancient Greek alphabet just yesterday. Philos' inner thoughts. So now I not only have to deal with temple studies, the game of love, and bullying from classmates, but I also have to worry about the Titans crisis 11 months from now. This crossover questline experience is too complete. He carefully hid the bay leaf in a hidden compartment under his pillow, a small space he had secretly carved out of the bed frame specifically for storing things that couldn't be exposed to light. Just as I hid, Lycas knocked on the door. Philos, are you asleep? I brought honey cake. Philos opened the door, and a chestnut-haired boy carried a ceramic plate with 3 golden, tempting cakes on it, emitting a sweet aroma. My mother baked this today to celebrate your victory in the debate. Lycas's eyes sparkled. You're amazing. You left Callimachus speechless. I heard he got so angry when he got back that he smashed 2 clay pots. Philos couldn't help but laugh. His servants are in for a rough time. The two sat on the edge of the bed sharing the cake. The sweetness of the honey melted on their tongues, finally easing some of the heaviness in their hearts. But you have to be careful, Lycas said in a low voice. Callimachus is a very vengeful man. I heard he's planning to embarrass you in music class. You know, the temple's music competition is next month. A music competition. Yes, it's a tradition before the rainy season every year. All those blessed by God must participate, and the winner will receive personal guidance from the Apollo priest. Lycas blinked. Callimachus plays the lyre really well, it's his best skill. Philos nodded thoughtfully. Philos's inner thoughts. A music competition. Aphrodite's contract requires me to master 2 instruments within 6 months. Perfect. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. By the way, Lycas suddenly leaned closer mysteriously. Have you noticed that Priestess Arya is paying special attention to you? Philos's heart tightened, but his face remained blank. Really? Of course, she's usually very aloof, and she hardly talks to anyone except Priest Leon. But she met with you alone on your very first day, and she even came to watch the debate today. I saw her sitting in the back row with my own eyes. Perhaps it's just a favor to the newcomers, Philos said vaguely. Lycas shook his head, giving him a, you wouldn't understand, look. Let me tell you, many young priests in the temple secretly admire Priestess Arya, but she never gives anyone a kind look. You're the first man she's ever approached. Philos nearly choked on the honey cake. Philos' inner thoughts. My dear Lycas, if you knew the true identity of that aloof priestess, you'd probably faint on the spot. After Lycas left, Philos lay on the wooden plank bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling. The rose mark on his wrist was slightly warm, as if reminding him of the 7-day agreement. Tomorrow will be the 7th day. He wanted to report his progress of the week to Cupid. What should I report? A victory in the debate, deciphering the linear script, or a new discovery about the Titan's seal? Lost in thought, he drifted off to sleep. In his dream, he saw the sky filled with stars arranged in strange patterns, the earth cracked open, and ancient whispers came from beneath the ground. Samsung. In succession. Wake. He woke up with a start. The sky outside the window was just beginning to lighten. The morning prayer bells haven't rung yet, but I can't fall asleep. Philos got up and took the laurel leaf from the hidden compartment. The leaves shimmered with a warm glow in my palm, like living things breathing. Philos' thoughts. Never mind, there's always a way out. Let's deal with the immediate problem first. As Lycas predicted, Callimachus started making things difficult during the morning music class. The music teacher was an old, gray-haired man named Euripides, supposedly the same name as the famous tragedian, but much more easygoing. Today we're going to learn a new mode, Euripides said, playing a lyre, the Phrygian mode, which is characterized by. Your Excellency, Callimachus suddenly raised his hand. I heard that Philos talked at length about the relationship between music and divinity in the debate. His musical talent must be very profound. Could you please ask him to demonstrate Phrygian mode for us? All eyes in the classroom were on Philos. Old priest glanced at the audience. Philos, would you like to give it a try? Philos rose calmly. I would be happy to, Lord Euripides. However, I've only just started learning, so my playing might not be very good. Please feel free to offer your guidance. He walked to the front of the classroom and sat down in front of Lyre. This is a 7-stringed lute, with a body made of olive wood and strings made of gut. He recalled the ancient Greek music theory he had studied in his previous life, his fingers lightly caressing the strings. Phrygian mode, equivalent to the modern natural minor key, is often used to express feelings of sadness and mystery. He played a short passage from the epitaph of Sikiros, the oldest surviving complete piece of ancient Greek music, inscribed on a tombstone unearthed in Turkey. Of course, this piece of music had not yet been composed at that time. The music flowed out, ancient and sorrowful, carrying the vicissitudes of 1,000 years. The classroom was completely silent. Old priest Euripides' eyes widened so much they almost popped out. Callimachus's expression went from smug to shocked, then to ashen. After the last note faded away, Euripides asked, trembling, "Child, what kind of music is this? I've never heard of that before." "It was an impromptu creation by me," Philos said without batting an eye. "The inspiration came from the sound of the wind I heard while herding sheep, and from my longing for my deceased loved ones." Philos's thoughts. "Sorry, Sikiros, but I'm just borrowing your work. Anyway, you won't be born for over 1,000 years, so it's not plagiarism, just cross-temporal borrowing." Improvisation. Euripides stood up excitedly. "Genius. This is genius. This melodic structure, this emotional expression. Philos, come to my study this afternoon. I need to give you some individual instruction." Callimachus was so angry he almost snapped the wax tablet in his hand. After class, Philos was surrounded by his classmates. "Philos, how did you learn it? Teach me. That melody is so beautiful, could you play it again? Were you really just a shepherd before? I find it unbelievable that you could have learned so much." Philos dealt with them one by one, catching a glimpse of Callimachus's angry departure out of the corner of his eye. Philos' inner thoughts. "Callimachus, did you really think you were going to roast me over a fire? Who knew you'd just hand me a pillow? Ha 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 tilde." In the afternoon, he arrived at Euripides' study as agreed. Old priest's study was filled with sheet music scrolls and various musical instruments, and the air was filled with the smell of parchment and pine resin. "My dear child, sit down, sit down." Euripides pointed enthusiastically to a chair and asked, "Tell me, how long have you been learning the piano?" "About 3 years, Philos gave a reasonable figure. "I figured it all out myself." "Self-taught. Unbelievable." Old priest paced around the room. "Your fingering is still a bit rusty, but your understanding of music, it's like you've been kissed by muses. By the way, have you ever heard Delphi's ritual music?" "No, sir." "Then I'll sing it for you." Euripides cleared his throat and began to sing an ancient melody. That was a hymn to Apollo, solemn and sacred, with a power that penetrates the soul. Philos closed his eyes and listened. In the melody, he seemed to see sunlight streaming through the temple colonnade, priests in flowing white robes, and incense smoke swirling around them, etc. That was not an illusion. He really saw it. When Euripides sang a certain high note, Philos's vision suddenly changed, the study disappeared. Instead, there was a magnificent temple, bathed in dazzling sunlight, with the air filled with the fragrance of laurel. "Stop, Your Highness," he suddenly shouted. Euripides stopped abruptly, looking at him with confusion. "What's wrong?" "My lord, when you sang the line, 'The Son of Light drives the golden chariot,' did you raise it by a semitone?" Old priest nodded in surprise. "Yes, this is Delphi's unique singing style, symbolizing the sun reaching its highest point." "How did you figure that out?" Philos didn't know how to explain it. That brief hallucination was clearly abnormal. He recalled Aphrodite's words, "On the night of the syzygy of 3 stars, the echoes of the Titans will seep into the mortal world." Have these echoes already begun? Or is it the effect of that laurel leaf? "Excuse me, sir, I suddenly have a bit of a headache." Philos rubbed his temples. "It's probably because I didn't sleep well last night." "Child, then go back and rest," Euripides said with concern. "Come again tomorrow, and I will teach you more complex modes." "You're very talented, Philos, truly talented." After leaving his study, Philos did not return to his dormitory, but instead headed towards Laurel Forest, the back garden of the temple. There was still some time before the agreed-upon evening, but he needed some quiet time. Laurel forest is quiet and deserted, with only the rustling of leaves in the wind. He sat down on the stone bench and took out the laurel leaf. The leaf lay quietly in my palm, showing no signs of distress. So what was that hallucination all about? He muttered to himself. It might be a remnant of my divine power. A lazy voice came from above. Philos suddenly looked up. Aphrodite, the goddess of love. This time, she didn't disguise herself as Priestess Arya, but appeared in her true form, lying on her side on a laurel branch, one hand supporting her chin, smiling at him. Today she wore a nearly transparent pale gold tulle dress, her golden hair cascading down like a waterfall, shimmering in the sunlight. Barefoot, she swayed gently in the air, a string of tiny gold bells tied to her ankles, making a crisp sound with each movement. Your Holiness, Philos stood up and bowed. I thought the appointed time was in the evening. Yes, cute little guy, it is indeed evening, but I can't wait. Aphrodite floated down from the tree, as light as a feather. I heard you shone brightly in music class today. Even that old fogey Euripides was amazed by you. How did you know? Hee Tilda, I know everything. She blinked and sat down on the stone bench opposite Philos. But seriously, did you write that piece? It sounds very ahead of its time, so ahead of its time that it doesn't seem like a product of this era. Philos felt a pang of anxiety, but remained composed. The inspiration came from the sound of the wind. The wind can't teach you Phrygian mode. Aphrodite leaned closer, the scent of roses wafting over him. Little one, you're uncovering more and more secrets. Everyone has their own secrets, goddess. Philos looked directly into her eyes. For example, why are you so concerned about the seal on the Titans? Aphrodite's smile faded slightly. Because of that war, my father was also involved. Your father, Uranus, the god of the sky, the first god king. Her tone became distant. He was overthrown by Kronos, and Kronos was overthrown by Zeus. The war of the gods, generation after generation, without end. She reached out and caught a falling laurel leaf. I was a child when the Titans were imprisoned. But I remember their roars, the sound of the earth tearing apart, and the blood staining the steps of Mount Olympus. Philos remained silent upon hearing this. This was the first time he had heard Cupid speak in such a tone, no longer frivolous, no longer playful, but with genuine weariness. So you don't want the tragedy to repeat itself. I hope for many things. Aphrodite suddenly laughed again, reverting to his nonchalant demeanor. I wish wine would always be sweet, roses would never fade, and every love story would have a happy ending, but you know, things rarely go as planned. She stood up, her gauze skirt fluttering in the wind. All right, time for sentimentality is over. Tell me about your week, my dear little God-blessed Tilda. Philos reported the facts as follows. The debate victory, the performance in music class, the progress in deciphering the linear script, and the individual guidance from Euripides. Aphrodite listened intently, his fingers rhythmically tapping the stone table. That's good. The first clause of the contract, pass the beginner's course assessment within 3 months, should be fine. The second rule, master 2 instruments. Lyre, you already have a foundation, so learn an aulos too, it's easier. Aulos, yes, it's a musical instrument that shepherds often use. You should have seen it before. She smiled slyly. And I think you'd look adorable playing the flute. Philos, as for the third point, complete an original work. Aphrodite stroked his chin. I have an idea. Isn't there a music competition next month? You can enter the competition with that. Improvised melody, made some minor alterations, and added lyrics. Lyrics praising love and beauty. Her eyes curved into crescents. After all, I am the goddess of love and beauty, and my darling should certainly sing my praises, shouldn't she? Philos' inner thoughts. So this is what you were waiting for. Letting me publicly praise the god of love is to announce to the world that I belong to you. Just thinking about it is exciting, Tilda. Hee. Is there a problem? Aphrodite tilted his head, looking completely innocent. Or do you think I'm not worthy of praise? No, you certainly deserve it. A goddess as beautiful as you. Philos readily agreed. I'm just worried that I won't write well and will tarnish your glory. Oh, don't worry. I will guide you, Tilda. She particularly emphasized the word guidance, saying, at this time every week, in addition to reporting on your progress, you also need to bring your creative progress. I want to review it personally. Philos suddenly had a bad feeling. That's right. Aphrodite seemed to remember something. Didn't you just ask about hallucinations? That was indeed a remnant of my divine power. I infused a little blessing into that laurel leaf, which can enhance your perception of art forms such as music and poetry. A side effect is that you might occasionally see some related images. She suddenly leaned very close, so close that Philos could count the number of her eyelashes. Do you like this gift? I really like it. My goddess. Philos moved back a little. You're welcome, you deserve it. Aphrodite finally stepped back, stretched, revealing his curves, and said, all right, that concludes this week's report. Remember to bring your first draft of the lyrics next time, I want to check it myself. She turned to leave, then suddenly looked back. I almost forgot, do you need my help with Callimachus? For example, give him a nightmare, or break a string on his lyre. No need, your majesty. Philos shook his head. I can handle this myself. HMPH, you've got guts. Aphrodite smiled, then I look forward to your performance. Remember, my little darling, the more dazzling you are, the happier I am. In an instant, a flash of golden light appeared. She disappeared from the spot. Only the lingering scent of roses in the air proved that she had been there. Philos sat on the stone bench for a while longer, sorting out his thoughts. Cupid's special guidance was more intimate and more dangerous than he had anticipated. She was clearly enjoying the process, like a cat playing with a mouse, but it was more than that. Philos' thoughts. The expression on her face when she mentioned her father, Uranus. Perhaps this god of love was not as frivolous and flirtatious as legend portrays him. A distant bell rang, reminding him that it was time for his afternoon arithmetic class. Philos gathered the laurel leaves and left Laurel Forest. As he walked into the corridor, he met Callimachus. The other person was obviously waiting for him, leaning against a pillar with his arms crossed and a fake smile on his face. Philos, you're having a good time alone with Priestess Arya, aren't you? Callimachus lowered his voice. I'm warning you, stay away from her. That's not something a shepherd like you should get involved in. Philos stopped and looked at him calmly. Callimachus, do you know what I learned while shepherding sheep? What's up? The more a dog barks, the less likely it is to actually bite, Philos said with a smile. Because a truly vicious dog will pounce directly. After saying that, he walked past the other person and headed straight for the classroom. Callimachus stood there stunned for a few seconds before realizing he had been compared to a dog, and his face turned pale with anger. Philos had already walked away, a slight smile on his lips. Philos' inner thoughts. All right, now it's time to learn arithmetic. After all, to completely conquer the goddess, just being able to play the piano and sing isn't enough, you also need to be good at math. Who knows if Cupid will ask me to count rose petals for her someday. The setting sun cast a long shadow of him. At the edge of the shadows, in Laurel Forest, Aphrodite vanished, watching the boy's departing figure, and chuckled softly. A dog that pounced straight at you. Interesting, my dear little one, are you hinting at something? She unfurled a rose from her fingertips, then casually crushed it. But you're right, the real culprit's dog doesn't bark. So, a sly golden glint flashed in Cupid's eyes. Then I'll reluctantly be the dog that pounces straight in. 2 days later, at dusk, Philos arrived at Laurel Forest as promised, bringing his first draft of the work. The parchment scroll contained only 4 lines of poetry, the ink so fresh you could almost smell the pine soot. Roses bloom in the morning dew. Her beauty was like that of a god who took pity on her. If you ask what this scene resembles, first stirrings of love, yet unspoken. As Aphrodite took the parchment, he deliberately brushed his fingertips against the back of Aphrodite's hand. She leaned against the stone bench, read the words one by one, and suddenly chuckled softly. The laughter sounded like wind chimes rolling across the jade steps. Dear Philos, she looked up, her golden eyes reflecting the afterglow of the setting sun. Are you writing about me, or the village girl you met while herding sheep? Philos remained unfazed. Of course, it is to praise you, my goddess. However, my writing skills are insufficient, and I fear I might offend your divine power. Your writing skills are rather weak. Aphrodite tossed the parchment lightly, and the scrolls transformed into a swarm of glowing butterflies in the air. I think you have too many thoughts on your mind. What do you mean by not daring to speak out? You dared to speak up in front of the entire audience at the debate that day, but you didn't dare to speak up in front of me. Butterflies fluttered around her, their wings scattering golden powder. Eros's thoughts. It seems this little guy is testing my limits. He wants to fulfill the contract, but doesn't want to be too blatant, afraid of losing his autonomy once he completely belongs to me. He's clever, but not clever enough. Philos looked at the illusion in the sky and calmly replied, when facing others, I only need to reason with them, but when facing you, I need courage. Oh, why? Because the truth is often the most dangerous. Philos met her gaze. For example, if I were to say that your hairstyle today, with your hair up in this bun, is even more eye-catching than it was 3 days ago when it was down, would you be happy to hear that or feel it's presumptuous? Aphrodite paused for a moment. Suddenly, all the butterflies froze in midair, their wings still outstretched, like specimens in amber. Eros's inner voice. He dares to flirt with me. A mere mortal boy, using such an almost provocative tone. No, this isn't provocation. It's a precise test. He knows what kind of praise will surprise me, and what kind of bluntness will make me pause. You're quite the smooth talker. She smiled and said, flicking her finger, the butterfly flew back into her palm and turned back into parchment, but what I want is not this kind of cautious flattery. Take it back and rewrite it. Please enlighten me, goddess. Aphrodite stood up, her tulle skirt brushing against the grass. She walked up to Philos, and the two were so close that they could see the shadows of each other's eyelashes. I want you to write a war song. War song. Philos rarely showed a hint of surprise. A battle song praising love and beauty. Love as a war. She stretched out her finger and lightly touched his heart. Conquest and being conquered, pursuit and escape, sweetness and pain, aren't they all fraught with danger? Even though her fingertips hadn't actually touched him, Philos felt his heart skip a beat. Use lyre for accompaniment and aulos for interludes. The lyrics should have the bugle call of the charge and the embers of the war. Aphrodite took a step back, his gaze becoming distant. I want a battle song, one that will make Ares frown, make Athena listen intently, and make Apollo want to tap their feet to the beat. Philos listened and pondered for a moment. Are you asking me to provoke 3 main gods at the same time during the music competition? Provocation. Ha 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 tilde. Aphrodite laughed. No, you misunderstood, it's a tribute. To glorify love through the lens of war, and to deconstruct war through the resilience of love, isn't this the kind of work worthy of a proponent of balance? Eros's voice. Let me see where your limits are, little guy tilde. Will you continue to cautiously walk the safe path, or dare to play with this fire with me? If you choose the latter, Mount Olympus has been silent for too long. As the sun completely sank below the horizon, Laurel Forest was enveloped in a hazy gray-blue hue. I want to see the first draft in 5 days. Aphrodite's voice sounded ethereal in the twilight. If it's well written, I will give you a generous reward. If the writing is mediocre. She didn't finish her sentence, but a gentle smile appeared on her lips before she turned and left Laurel Forest without looking back. Philos was perfectly clear at that moment that perhaps the unfulfilled meaning was clearer than any threat. When he returned to his dormitory, it was already completely dark. Lycus was squatting at his door, holding up a small oil lamp. Philos, where have you been? Priest Euripides has been looking for you all afternoon, saying there's an urgent performance assignment. Performance assignment? Yes, there is a banquet at Island Lord's mansion in 3 days to celebrate his son's engagement, and the temple has invited musicians to perform. Lycus lowered his voice. It was originally scheduled to be Callimachus and his small group, but this afternoon Callimachus suddenly broke a string and cut his hand while practicing the piano. Isn't that a coincidence? Philos squinted. Is he badly injured? It's not serious, but you can't play the piano for at least 7 days. So Priest Euripides made a last-minute change, selecting you, me, and Daphne. Lycus was both excited and nervous. This is a great opportunity to shine. Island Lord's mansion. Lots of nobles come here. Philos's thoughts. A broken string and a cut. What a coincidence. Could it be the nightmare, or broken string, that Aphrodite mentioned, or Callimachus orchestrated this himself? What piece shall we play? Philos asked. It's just a traditional engagement song, but Priest Euripides said we could add some new ideas. Lycus's eyes lit up. The piece you played the other day was wonderful. We can arrange it into an ensemble piece. Philos looked at Lycus's purely excited face and swallowed his doubts. Okay, we'll start rehearsals tomorrow. That night, Philos spread out a new parchment under the oil lamp. On the left are the elements needed for the war song: charge, horn, sword, blood and fire. The characteristics of love are listed on the right: attraction, intimacy, possession, sweetness, and pain. The middle is blank, waiting to be merged. He tried writing a few lines, then crossed them out. Too straightforward and it sounds like a real war song, too subtle and it loses its power. As night deepened, he suddenly recalled a fragment of an ancient Greek poem he had read in his previous life, a line from Sappho's poem, a metaphor for love as a battle. Inspiration struck like lightning. He picked up his pen and wrote the first paragraph. The moment our eyes first met was like a battle cry, my heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. I, holding a rose, marched to the battlefield amidst contradictions, while you built a sweet fortress behind your smile. After writing the last word, he put down his pen and looked out at the crescent moon. The rose mark on my wrist felt slightly warm, as if echoing the poem. Meanwhile, on Mount Olympus, Aphrodite was reclining on a cloud bed, looking at the boy's profile as he pondered deeply through a water mirror. She toyed with a strand of golden hair in her hand, a smile playing on her lips. Eros's voice, a fusion of war song and love poem. This clear yet passionate melody is far more moving than ordinary pieces. This little guy has many surprises in store, and I especially love these unexpected delights. Tilda. She flicked her finger lightly, and a wisp of extremely faint golden dust traveled through space and landed on Philos's pen tip. Philo suddenly felt his mind flow smoothly, and the second verse flowed out naturally. Every step closer is like conquering territory, every sigh like the neighing of warhorses. If love is a battle destined to be lost, I will still march on, for the spoils are a single tear from your eye. Philos frowned after writing this. This style is too mature, it doesn't seem like something a 16-year-old could write. Moreover, there is an indescribable divine luster in the rhythm of these words. He looked at the tip of the pen and noticed that there were extremely fine gold particles shimmering there. Philos' inner thoughts. God of love, this is cheating. But, since you're personally giving me pointers, I'll gladly accept. Hee. Sigma, Sigma. He continued writing, blending the inspiration that Aphrodite had inadvertently provided with his own ideas. As the last sentence was written, the oil lamp had burned out, and the morning light shone through the window. The parchment contains a complete and unprecedented poem, a war song and a love poem. It contains both the clash of swords and the tender emotions of love. Philos stretched his stiff shoulders and looked out the window at the gradually brightening sky. The island lord's mansion banquet 3 days later, the music competition 7 days later, and the syzygy of 3 stars 11 months later. Every task is like a challenge, and he is now a samurai who has just drawn his sword. Strangely, he didn't feel tired, instead, he felt a long-lost excitement. It's like the thrill of racing against time and battling with knowledge when you stayed up all night to finish a thesis in your past life. However, this time the thesis tutor is goddess of love and beauty herself. Then come on, he murmured to himself, rolling up the parchment. Let's see who wins this battle. As soon as he finished speaking, he walked to the bedside, took off his shoes, and got into bed to sleep. The morning bell rings, and a new day begins. Meanwhile, in the temple of love in the clouds, Aphrodite looked at the firelight in the boy's eyes reflected in the water mirror and suddenly felt that perhaps this game was much more interesting than she had imagined. She reached out and touched the mirror, her fingertips creating ripples. Philos in the mirror seemed to sense something and looked up at the sky. In that instant, across layers of clouds and the void, their gazes seemed to truly meet. Cupid's thoughts. Grow up quickly, my little darling. Time may really be running out. Outside the window, the first ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, illuminating the fleeting worry in Cupid's eyes. That worry was so slight that it was quickly masked by his usual lazy smile. But it did exist. Like the morning dew on a rose, it evaporates as soon as the sun rises, yet it truly condensed.
Thanks for watching my video. Please like and share it.